Chapter 384. Lying on the bed, Lu Yi recalled the experience after the transmission array was activated and his face turned green. He had actually experienced the transmission array many times. Every time he entered or returned from the sect, he would use the Heaven's Fate pillar to do so. This kind of transmission array was extremely gentle and the whole process was extremely fast. After his vision changed for a moment, the transmission array was already completed. So, Lu Yi had never thought that the transmission array would be such a terrible experience. After activating that teleportation subarray, he immediately felt like stepping on air and falling into a bottomless abyss. Furthermore, this process was very long. During the process, he felt like there was a kind of power that would roll him into a long strip and flatten him, repeating the process over and over again. He had experienced some storms before. He had fought 43 battles with his 5th order cultivation on top of the Golden Light Peak, so even if he was exhausted, he was fearless. But when he thought about the terrible feeling of the transmission array before, he couldn't help palpitating. Throughout the transmission array, he was like a fallen leaf drifting with the waves, unable to circulate any spirit chi, making him feel very insecure. What made him feel even more speechless was that he was injured. During the transmission array, he felt as if a sharp weapon had cut into his body, leaving cuts and bruises all over his body and clothes in tatters. Fortunately, his physique was strong and the injuries were only superficial. After Hua Xi's treatment, he would soon recover. But this psychological shadow was somewhat difficult to erase. One day later, Lu Yi returned to the small courtyard in high spirits after changing into a clean set of clothes. Yi and Hua Xi looked at him worriedly. Again? There was a small problem before and I needed to adjust it. This time, there should be no problem. Lu Yi made a solemn vow and patted his cheeks, secretly cheering himself on. As long as the spirit array he arranged was accurate enough and stable enough, nothing like before would happen again. Under the worried gazes of Yi and Hua Xi, Yang Kai rearranged the damaged transmission array in the small courtyard and quickly rushed to a place 20 kilometers away. The array flag he had thrown here yesterday was still there, which made him breathe a sigh of relief. This place was already very deep in myriad poison forest, so myriad demon ridge cultivators wouldn't come here. The poisonous creatures in the forest had no interest in things like array flags, so naturally, he wouldn't lose them. 2 hours later, in the small courtyard, Yi and Hua Xi suddenly heard some commotion. The two of them looked at each other and tacitly ran towards the source of the commotion. After a short while, he saw Lu Yi in ragged clothes, looking like a bloody man. "Help me." Lu Ye's face was as pale as a sheet of paper as he crawled on the ground. He stubbornly raised his head and extended a hand toward the two women. His vision spun, and he couldn't even stand up. Another day later, in the small courtyard, Yi and Hua Xi looked at Lu Yi expressionlessly. Lu Yi said solemnly, "There's definitely no problem this time. I've already found the source of the problem. I just need to make some adjustments." More than 2 hours later, Hua Xi carried the bloodied Lu Yi back to the wooden house. On the 4th day, the same 3 people were in the same position. "You won't believe anything I say anyway. Seeing is believing." Hoopa crawled on the windowsill on the 3rd floor and glanced at Lu Yi with pity. He then retracted his head and nimbly pulled out a spirit stone from the storage bag hanging around his neck with his claws. He put it in his mouth and crunched it. On the 5th day, facing Yi and Hua Xi's inquisitive gazes, Lu Ye's lips squirmed, but he didn't say a word and turned to leave. After he left, Hua Xi asked Yi with a teasing expression, "Guess which direction he'll come from this time?" Yi tapped her red lips with her slender fingers and thought seriously for a moment before pointing in a direction, "From this direction." Hua Xi pursed her lips and smiled, "Then I bet he'll come from that direction." They waited quietly and listened carefully at the same time. Not long after, there was suddenly an abnormal commotion from not far away. Hua Xi smiled, "You win." The direction of the commotion was exactly the direction Yi had pointed out before. "Let's save him," Hua Xi said as she walked in that direction. Over the past few days, the two women had already gotten used to Lu Yi making himself miserable every time. Then, they would bring him back to the wooden house for treatment and recuperation. Then, the next day, he would run out and continue to cause trouble. However, before they could take more than a few steps, they saw Lu Yi staggering in their direction like a drunkard. Unlike the previous few times, although Lu Ye's face was still pale, he didn't show any signs of injury. Even his clothes were intact. Yi hurriedly stepped forward to support him. Lu Yi grinned at her. "It's done." Although the effect was a little different from what he had imagined, the adjustment of the teleportation array had been completed. However, there was no way to accurately locate the teleportation array. Logically speaking, Lu Yi should have appeared on the teleportation array in the small courtyard, but in reality, he was more than 30 meters away. It wasn't that there was a problem with the array he had arranged, but that the array wasn't stable enough. Therefore, there was a slight deviation during the teleportation process. The distance of this deviation would increase as the teleportation distance increased. It was very simple to solve this problem. He just had to raise his cultivation or increase the stability of the array. At present, Lu Yi couldn't solve this problem. In addition, Lu Yi could vaguely sense that the distance between the child array and the mother array of the array he had arranged now was best not to exceed 100 kilometers. Beyond this distance, the array might not be effective. After all, his strength was still a little too low. As his strength increased in the future, the array he set up would be more stable and the distance he could cross would increase. After the adjustment of the teleportation array was completed, Lu Yi calmed his heart and recuperated for a day, allowing himself to return to peak condition. Then, he told Yi and Hua Xiai about his plans. If nothing unexpected happened, the two women would be following Lu Yi. Hua Xi's cultivation was now at Heaven 7, and her methods of killing enemies were impossible to guard against. She had the capital to roam the core regions alone. Yi and Hu Po's strength had also improved rapidly during this period of time. Although it was difficult to judge their specific cultivation levels, they definitely wouldn't drag Lu Yi down in terms of strength. "This time, I'll go alone. It'll be more convenient for me to do things. Also, believe me, you don't want to experience the feeling of being teleported. Also, the array I set up now has a limited capacity. It won't be much of a problem to teleport me alone, but if there's another person, I can't guarantee success." Hearing Lu Yi mention the teleportation array and recalling the various encounters he'd had in the past few days, the two women couldn't help but feel their hearts palpitate. Being teleported out covered in blood and in tattered clothes was indeed an unsightly sight. "Then you must be careful," Hua Xiai urged. "I know. Just wait for me here." With nothing to prepare, Lu Yi immediately set off on his journey. First, he went 20 kilometers away to retrieve the array flags he'd left behind. Then, he summoned his spirit boat and soared into the sky. It had been a full 2 months since Lu Yi had been trapped in the Myriad Poisons Forest. When Lu Yi was first trapped in the Myriad Poisons Forest, the cultivators of the Myriad Demons Ridge thought that he wouldn't live for long. But to this day, he was still alive and well. They were certain that Lu Yi must have found a safe place in the Myriad Poisons Forest. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to survive for so long. The Myriad Demons Ridge had long lost their patience, but they were unwilling to retreat just like that. A large number of Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators were stationed around the Myriad Poisons Forest. Even in the sky, there were people constantly patrolling and searching, preventing Lu Yi from escaping on his artifact. In the Myriad Poisons Forest, Lu Yi soared hundreds of feet into the sky before escaping the thick poisonous fog. The sky was clear and bright sunlight shone into his vision. Lu Yi felt as though he could see the light of day again. He took a deep breath and felt comfortable all over. Slowly turning around, he saw a person looking at him in bewilderment hundreds of feet away. This person was clearly a cultivator from the Myriad Demons Ridge who was in charge of patrolling and searching for traces of Lu Yi in the sky. After 2 months of fruitless searching, he couldn't react in time when Lu Yi suddenly appeared before him. It wasn't until he met Lu Ye's eyes that this person was surprised and overjoyed, shouting, "Lu Ye!" As soon as his voice fell, Lu Yi had already rushed towards him. This person's face instantly turned pale. He had long heard of Lu Ye's achievements and strength, but in his excitement just now, he had forgotten about this. Although he had the cultivation of a heavenly 8, he knew that he was no match for this sect exterminating Yi. Sensing that something was wrong, he immediately raised his hand and sent a stream of light towards Lu Yi. At the same time, he took out a spirit talisman from his storage bag and slapped it on his body. In an instant, a golden light enveloped him. Spirit talismans were more commonly used by low-level cultivators because their means of fighting were too simple. Spirit talismans often played a great role. In the past, when Lu Yi set off from Blue Cloud Mountain and rushed all the way to the Blue Blood Sect station, many of the cultivators he encountered along the way would use spirit talismans to fight. But this didn't mean that cultivators wouldn't use spirit talismans after their cultivation reached a high level. After a cultivator's cultivation reached the 7th order, offensive spirit talismans were rarely used. This was because after a cultivator reached the 7th order, they had the ability to control their spirit talismans. Compared to a one-time use spirit talisman, it was naturally more cost-effective. After reaching the 7th order, most of the spirit talismans used by cultivators were defensive or auxiliary. Moreover, the quality of these spirit talismans was higher than those used by low-level cultivators. For example, the Heavenly 8 cultivator in front of him was using a mid-rank golden body talisman. With this spirit talisman protecting him, even if a Heavenly 9 cultivator came, he wouldn't be able to break through the golden light barrier in a short time. Of course, nothing was absolute. Cultivators in the core circle would also use offensive spirit talismans. If that was the case, then one had to be careful because those spirit talismans were all extremely powerful. Most of them were treasures hidden at the bottom of their chests. This Heavenly 8 cultivator attacked Lu Yi with his golden body talisman. It could be said that he had done it in one go. Although his reaction just now was slightly slower, he was extremely experienced in fighting against enemies. He knew what to do to better preserve his life when facing someone stronger than him. Then, he saw a blade flash past in front of his eyes. In an instant, his vision was filled with a rich fiery red color. His mind was instantly shrouded by boundless fear. The middle-grade golden body talisman that he relied on was shattered by this blade. The sharp blade slashed across his neck as if it was cutting tofu, easily slicing through it. Chapter 385. As his consciousness blurred, the myriad Devil Ridge cultivator realized that Lu Yi was already a Heaven 8. As a Heaven 8 cultivator, he couldn't even take a single slash from the other party. How could the other party's saber be so sharp? Even a mid-grade golden body talisman couldn't block the power of that slash. He couldn't understand. Blood gushed out from the neck as the head flew off. The headless corpse swayed and fell down. A stream of light shot out from the weapon box at Lu Ye's waist and circled around the waist of the myriad Devil Ridge cultivator. When it returned, it brought back a storage bag. Killing people and seizing treasures in one go. More figures rushed over from all directions. At the same time, there was a burst of shouting. Lu Ye is out. Lu Ye is here. Hovering in the air, Lu Ye's eyes drooped slightly. He held the mountain plate saber and pointed the tip to the ground. He looked at the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators approaching him. With a light tap of his foot, he activated his spirit power and turned into a stream of light that rushed forward. When he killed his way into the myriad poison forest, he was a Heaven 7 cultivator. Now that his cultivation had reached a higher level and his strength had increased greatly, he wanted to see if he could kill his way out of the encirclement by himself. After being blocked by so many myriad Devil Ridge cultivators for more than 2 months, Lu Yi naturally had to return the favor. It didn't matter if he couldn't kill his way out. The myriad poison forest was right below him. As long as he hid in the forest, no matter how many myriad Devil Ridge cultivators there were, they couldn't do anything to him. There were only 5 cultivators blocking the way ahead. Seeing Lu Yi approaching, they all took out their weapons and attacked him. The light from the weapons intertwined and moved nimbly. Lu Yi stepped on the spirit boat and nimbly dodged the attacks. If he couldn't avoid them, he would block them with the mountain plate saber. The distance between them quickly closed. The expressions of the 5 people in front gradually became serious. Before Lu Yi could get close, they quickly scattered. However, just as they moved, 9 streams of light shot out from the weapon box at Lu Ye's waist, accurately hitting the 5 of them. The speed and lethality of these 9 streams of light far exceeded the methods used by the 5 of them. Swish! 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 Blood splattered everywhere, accompanied by miserable screams. Of the 5 people who had split up, 3 fell into the poison forest below. The remaining 2 were both injured. Lu Yi had already arrived in front of one of them. That person seemed to be an individual cultivator, and his blood was abundant and vigorous. A large shield spirit artifact hung from his arm, and he swatted it down at Lu Yi. The Pan Mountain saber slashed down, and the moment the saber and the shield came into contact, the physique cultivator's eyes widened. He only felt a vast amount of energy in front of him, and his body was sent flying. He was horrified. What kind of weapon cultivator was this? His strength was even greater than his own. Before he could come back to his senses, a scorching heat had already rushed toward him, and the figure of a magnificent vermilion bird appeared in his field of vision. It was Lu Ye's Fire Phoenix technique. This was a technique he had learned from the Red Lotus soaring to the heavens. After Lu Yi obtained the Fire Phoenix spirit pattern, the power of this technique had greatly increased. Now, the Fire Phoenix technique created a vermilion bird figure, and even the feathers on its body were clearly discernible. It looked like a miniature version of the world-destroying Fire Phoenix spirit pattern. The Fire Phoenix technique slammed into the physique cultivator's body. Scorching flames enveloped him, burning through his blood essence and protective spirit energy. The physique cultivator cried out in alarm as he followed in the footsteps of his 3 companions. Lu Yi turned his head and saw that the last myriad demon ridge cultivator had already fled far away, clutching his stomach and spitting out blood. Lu Yi didn't chase after him. This fellow had already been severely injured, and he didn't know if he could survive. Chasing after him would only be a waste of time. The spirit boat turned into a stream of light once more and shot off into the distance. The 9 imperial artifacts flew back under Lu Ye's control and returned to the weapon box at his waist. Lu Ye had appeared. This news spread in all directions at an extremely fast speed. In the direction Lu Yi was heading, cultivators from the myriad demon ridge constantly rose into the air on their artifacts to greet him. After waiting for 2 months, this fellow had finally appeared. What the myriad demon ridge had to do now was to do their best to kill him and prevent future troubles. In an instant, a mighty stream of light covered the sky and earth, gathering in the direction Lu Yi was heading. In the sky above the myriad poison forest, Lu Yi ran like the wind, his figure almost never stopping as he fought with batch after batch of myriad demon ridge cultivators who were in charge of patrolling the sky above the myriad poison forest. Along the way, corpses fell to the ground and blood splattered across the sky. A moment later, a large stream of light appeared in his field of vision. It was the arrival of the myriad demon ridge's main force. At a rough glance, there were nearly 1,000 of them, densely filling his field of vision. Even if Lu Yi was now a celestial 8 and his strength had skyrocketed, it was impossible for him to fight against so many myriad demon ridge cultivators alone, unless he constructed the Fire Phoenix spirit pattern again. However, the myriad demon ridge had already suffered a great loss 2 months ago, so how could they not be prepared for this? The distance between the 2 sides quickly shortened, and the shouts from the myriad demon ridge reached his ears. Most of them were shouting for Lu Yi to come forward and die because they had more people. When they were 2,000 feet away from each other, Lu Ye's figure suddenly rushed up diagonally. Looking at his posture, it seemed that he wanted to avoid the main force of the myriad demon ridge and escape from a higher place where the defense was weaker. Realizing this, the myriad demon ridge side quickly responded. They immediately changed their direction and intercepted him diagonally upwards. Standing on the ground and looking up, one could see many streams of light dragging long ribbons straight into the sky, flying higher and higher. Soon, the leading stream of light had passed through the clouds and could no longer be seen. No one could say how high the sky of the Spirit Stream battlefield or the 9 states was, because so far, no one had flown out. Even the Divine Sea Realm cultivators had a limit to the height they could fly. This limit was not the limit of the body, but the suppression of the 9 heavens' divine thunder in the sky. When one reached a certain height, it would attract the 9 heavens' divine thunder. The higher one flew, the greater the power of the 9 heavens' divine thunder, until even the Divine Sea Realm cultivators could not withstand it. There were rumors that if one could break through the suppression of the 9 heavens' divine thunder, the Divine Sea Realm cultivator could reach a higher level. Therefore, since ancient times, many Divine Sea Realm cultivators who had reached the limit of their cultivation would challenge the 9 heavens' divine thunder, but so far, no one had succeeded. The height that a Spirit Stream Realm cultivator could fly with was naturally not as high as a Divine Sea Realm cultivator. At this time, Lu Yi could clearly feel that the higher he went, the more an invisible pressure pressed down on his body, causing his speed to become slower and slower until he could not fly any higher. In the dark, there was even a trace of danger higher up. If he guessed correctly, it was the sense of danger brought by the legendary 9 heavens' divine thunder. When he turned his head to look, there were dozens of flowing lights rapidly approaching him. Their speed was beyond his imagination, and within the flowing lights, there were clear and melodious sounds of swords. Lu Ye's sharp senses made him feel as if he was being pointed at by a sharp sword, and his skin was stinging. These dozens of flowing lights were the figures of sword cultivators. In the 9 prefectures, in terms of killing power and speed, there was no sect that could compete with these sword cultivators. Sword cultivators and ghost cultivators were both sects that were born with the ability to kill enemies above their level. Compared to ghost cultivators who were proficient in stealth and assassination, sword cultivators could kill enemies above their level because they put all their focus on the Tao of killing. Because they were focused on nothing else, they could break through the 9 prefectures. Because of this, sword cultivators were the least in number among all sects, even fewer than medical cultivators. For example, the Bei Xian Sword Sect, a first-grade sect in the War Province, from top to bottom, there were no more than 1,000 sword cultivators in the entire sect. Looking at any first-grade sect in the 9 prefectures, such a situation was impossible. However, 800 sword cultivators coming down the heavenly mountain was a big event that could shake the entire 9 prefectures. It meant that the entire Bei Xian sword sect had come out in full force. The Grand Heaven Alliance had sword cultivators, and so did the Myriad Devil Ridge. Now, these dozens of sword cultivators from various forces were the main force and reliance to hunt down Lu Yi. Previously, when Lu Yi had just entered the core region, the cultivators of the Myriad Devil Ridge had already experienced his speed when chasing after him. Therefore, if they wanted to catch up with him in terms of speed, only sword cultivators could do it. The other sects' cultivators were simply not enough. These dozens of sword cultivators did not disappoint. In terms of speed, they were indeed much faster than the others, even faster than Lu Yi. Although Lu Yi wanted to test the sword cultivator's abilities, he was not mentally ill. Naturally, he could not fight against dozens of sword cultivators who were known for their killing power alone. If he was entangled by these sword cultivators, he was destined to have a bad ending. Therefore, when Lu Yi flew to the highest point, he quickly descended. Under the surprised gazes of the dozens of sword cultivators who were about to approach him, Lu Yi flew down at a faster speed than before. Normally, Lu Yi was indeed not as fast as these sword cultivators. However, he had the wind spirit tattoos that could support him at any time. Seeing Lu Ye's actions, many cultivators of the Myriad Devil Ridge immediately felt that something was wrong. At this moment, because of the pursuit of Lu Yi, the originally tight formation of the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators became clear. The strongest group was at the highest point, the average strength was in the middle, and those below were the weakest group. In less than 10 breaths, Lu Yi fell from the sky like a meteorite and was only 300 feet away from the poisonous barrier below. The spirit boat under his feet flashed with light, and the wind spirit tattoos continued to activate. It turned into a stream of light and suddenly changed direction, crashing forward. The myriad Devil Ridge cultivators in this position were basically at the 7th heaven level, and there were not many who were at the 8th heaven level. Seeing Lu Yi rushing over, the cultivators all attacked. In an instant, streams of light and spells blotted out the sky and covered the earth and blasted toward Lu Yi. Cultivators flying in the air and fighting on the ground were two different things. Not to mention the exhaustion and restraint of a cultivator's mind when flying in the air, fighting in the air also allowed one to move more nimbly. Cultivators with powerful minds would undoubtedly have a great advantage when fighting in the air. Like a swallow flapping its wings in a storm, Lu Ye's figure drifted erratically, avoiding the densest areas of attacks. He dodged the spells and flying weapons that came at him. The Pan Mountain Saber in his hand constantly waved, blocking some scattered attacks, and crashed into the enemy formation. The weapon box buzzed, and 9 flying weapons flew out, turning into 9 streams of light, wrapping up a storm of death and bringing an aura of destruction. Chapter 386. Blood splattered everywhere, accompanied by streaks of light. Screams rang out endlessly. Wherever Lu Yi passed, there would be a rain of blood and broken limbs. Behind him, because of the deaths of the myriad Demon Ridge cultivators, specks of red light flew out and chased after his figure. By the time Lu Yi broke out of the formation of the myriad Demon Ridge cultivators, there were already 30 specks of red light chasing after him. Each speck of light represented the death of a cultivator. 30 specks meant 30 people, more people were injured. The specks of light fell into Lu Ye's battlefield imprint and disappeared. The corpses of the myriad Demon Ridge cultivators fell from the sky like dumplings into a pot, falling into the dark green poison miasma. Although the losses were not small, compared to the number of myriad Demon Ridge cultivators, it was nothing. The sound of swords rang out. It was the sword cultivators who had returned. Dazzling flying swords pierced through the sky. They were more agile and lethal than the weapons of other sections. Before they even got close, they brought great danger to Lu Yi. The speed of flying swords was incomparable to the speed of flying weapons. Almost as soon as the sword light surged, the flying swords were already in front of him. Lu Ye's figure fell directly into the boundless poison miasma, disappearing without a trace. The sword lights chased after him and went deep into the poison miasma. However, the sword cultivators soon realized that something was wrong. After their flying swords fell into the poison miasma, they quickly became sluggish and their connection with themselves weakened. The spirituality of their flying swords weakened. The poison in the poison miasma was extremely corrosive. This corrosion was undoubtedly very effective against the spirit weapons used by cultivators. The situation was not good. The sword cultivators had grave expressions. No matter how many people they had or how strong they were, the initiative was always in Lu Ye's hands in the battle within the myriad poison forest. If Lu Ye dared to rush into the boundless poison miasma, would they dare? Thousands of feet away, the thick poison miasma broke open and Lu Ye's figure soared into the sky. In that direction, there were some myriad Demon Ridge cultivators watching from the sky. They were not too strong. This time, they were caught off guard. When they saw Lu Yi appear, they all scattered. However, some of them reacted a little too slowly. Another wave of slaughter ensued, and one figure after another fell from the sky while screaming miserably. Dozens of sword cultivators immediately split into 2 groups. One group flew close to the poison miasma, cutting off Lu Ye's escape route. The other group chased after him. In this way, it would be very difficult for Lu Yi to escape into the poison miasma unless he could break through the sword cultivator's blockade. Lu Yi obviously wouldn't fight these sword cultivators head-on. He chose a direction and flew off on his artifact. Of myriad demon ridge cultivators chased after him. The same scene as before appeared once again. Those with higher cultivation bases and faster flying artifacts rushed to the front, while those with lower cultivation bases and slower flying artifacts slowly fell behind. As time passed, the distance between them grew wider and wider. Seeing Lu Yi make a big detour and suddenly come back, the cultivators at the back of the group immediately changed their expressions. Lu Yi had done the same thing to them before, and as a result, they had lost dozens of people. Now that he was going to do the same thing again, who knew how many people would die? Although the sword cultivators chased after him with all their might, in terms of speed, they were still inferior to Lu Yi, who had the wind travel spirit tattoo. They could only try their best to keep up with him. The formation of the myriad demon ridge cultivators was completely messed up. Seeing Lu Yi coming back, the cultivators with low cultivation bases naturally wouldn't just sit there and wait for death. Most of them scattered in all directions while a small number of them gathered together and defended their positions, nervously activating defensive spirit artifacts and spells. Lu Ye's figure flashed not far in front of them. At the same time, 9 streams of light shot out from the Imperial equipment, and the figures of fire phoenixes flapped their wings and flew out. No cultivator's defense could withstand his attack. Even a body cultivator with a spiritual shield would not be able to withstand the attack of the double sharpness spiritual tattoo. The figure of a fire phoenix followed closely behind. The scene suddenly became comical. A large number of myriad demon ridge cultivators chased after Lu Yi, while Lu Yi chased after some scattered fellows. Those who chased after Lu Yi could not do anything to him, but those who were targeted by him did not have a good ending. Corpses kept falling from the sky. It was not until more myriad demon ridge cultivators came to support that Lu Ye's crazy actions were stopped. There were thousands of myriad demon ridge cultivators gathered outside the forest of 1,000 poisons. Lu Yi had only seen about 1,000 people because there were only so many cultivators in the direction he was going. There were more cultivators from the myriad demon ridge who had not arrived yet. At this moment, thousands of people had gathered, and the sky above the forest of 1,000 poisons was filled with flowing light from spirit artifacts. Lu Yi had already fled in one direction. If he had only faced about 1,000 people, he could have dealt with the enemy for a while. However, the myriad demon ridge cultivators had gathered, and the number of people had increased dramatically. This method obviously would not work. Moreover, although he had not fought with the enemy for a long time, he had consumed a lot of spirit power, especially when he had to add the wind travel spirit tattoo to his flying spirit artifact. It could be said that 60% of the spirit power consumed was because of this. What made him dissatisfied was that he was not flexible enough to control his flying spirit artifact. It was difficult for him to perfectly control the flying spirit artifact under his feet like giant armor. There would always be a sense of sluggishness when fighting with others while flying. This was not the case for giant armor. This fellow had the ability to fly on a flying spirit artifact that ordinary people could not compare to. Compared to most cultivators, Lu Yi was already very good at flying on a flying spirit artifact. However, compared to giant armor, there was still a gap. This might also be a kind of talent. There was still a large number of pursuers behind him, especially those sword cultivators. They were all one-track minded and could not be shaken off like maggots in a tarsal bone. Lu Yi had the wind travel spirit tattoo to support him, and they also had some secret techniques. Although the duration was not long, they did not have to worry about being left behind by Lu Yi for a short time. To the myriad demon ridge, this experience could be said to be a great humiliation. After waiting bitterly for more than 2 months, Lu Yi finally appeared again. However, more than 1,000 people were led around by him like dogs. Even if the sword cultivators attacked together, it did not have much effect. Lu Yiye was safe and had broken through the encirclement. On the contrary, they had lost more than 100 people. This made many cultivators of the myriad demon ridge feel hatred in their hearts. They secretly cursed this fellow for bullying the weak and fearing the strong. He specifically targeted those with low cultivation and did not confront those with high cultivation at all. What made the myriad demon ridge even more terrified was that this fellow had now advanced to Heaven 8. Now that he was at Heaven 8, how far could Heaven 9 be? Compared to the previous encounter in the Hidden Fog Mountain, Lu Yiye's strength had undoubtedly increased a lot after advancing to Heaven 8. In the Hidden Fog Mountain, Lu Yi relied more on the formation set up in advance to kill the enemy. However, this time, he did not use any external methods and relied on his own ability. Although it was true that he had only picked up the soft persimmons, but from another perspective, being able to avoid those tough bones was also his ability. In the past 2 months, the Myriad Demon Ridge had sent thousands of people to besiege the Forest of 1,000 Poisons, attracting the attention of many people. Everyone wanted to know what would happen to Lu Yi in the end. When today's news spread, many people across the 9 states were greatly shocked. Lu Yi had actually single-handedly killed his way out and broke through the Myriad Demon Ridge's encirclement. Although many cultivators of the Myriad Demon Ridge were still chasing after him, everyone knew that Lu Ye's ability to kill his way out of the Forest of 1,000 Poisons meant that the Myriad Demon Ridge's 2-month siege had ended in failure. In the future, it would be difficult for the Myriad Demon Ridge to threaten Lu Ye's life in the Spirit Stream battlefield, unless there was a good opportunity. The only thing that made the Myriad Demon Ridge feel gratified was that they had already lost face in dealing with Lu Ye. At this moment, they were not afraid of losing face again. As the saying goes, lice do not itch. The pursuit continued. Even though most people could not keep up, there were still a few people who persisted, especially those sword cultivators. Even so, the distance between them was gradually widening. After 2 hours, these sword cultivators had completely lost track of Lu Yi. Even though they were unwilling, the sword cultivators had to admit that in terms of speed, they had lost to a weapon cultivator. This guy was simply too fast. It was completely unreasonable. The Myriad Demon Ridge's cultivators were all looking for Lu Yi. Although the pursuit had failed, the operation against Lu Yi was far from over. This was an order from the upper echelons of the various Myriad Demon Ridge sects. Compared to the Spirit Stream Realm cultivators, the True Lake Realm and Spirit Sea Realm cultivators could clearly see the threat that Lu Yi posed to the entire camp. The Jade Blood sect had once produced a Feng Wujiang. They did not want a second one. The Thousand Feather sect's Qin Zheng had created the Leaf Eliminating Alliance in the Hidden Fog Mountain with the goal of killing Lu Yi. It was only a temporary organization, and after the Hidden Fog Mountain, the organization had fallen apart. On this day, the organization had resurfaced, and had become a formal organization. It was led by Shi Guang, the current top disciple of the Spirit Stream Division, who hailed from the first-rank Dao Profound sect. In just half a day, hundreds of sects from the Myriad Devil Ridge had announced that they wanted to join the Banishing Leaf Alliance, including almost all of the Spirit Stream Division's top disciples. They were determined to kill Lu Yi before he could reach the 9th heaven. On one hand, the upper echelons of these sects had already given the order to kill Lu Yi before he reached the Spirit Stream realm. On the other hand, these Spirit Stream realm cultivators did not dare to let Lu Yi live any longer. This guy was already so difficult to deal with at the 8th heaven level. Once he reached the 9th heaven, wouldn't he be able to do as he pleased in the Spirit Stream realm? A large number of people were sent out to search for traces of Lu Yi. Countless cultivators in the entire Leaf Removal League were on high alert. Even the cultivators who were most passionate about cultivation had temporarily given up on it. They were only waiting for clues of Lu Yi to lead the way. 1,000 kilometers away from the Myriad Poisons Forest was a Heaven's Secret Market. In the outer circle of the battlefield, there were still many markets formed by rogue cultivators. However, in the inner circle and the core circle, there were basically no such markets. This was because the markets in the inner circle and the core circle were basically all established by the Heavenly Secret Business Alliance. Chapter 387. Heaven's secret markets could be seen everywhere in the inner and core circles. There were even Heaven's secret cities named after Heaven's secret. Although cultivators could enter the Heaven's secret treasury with enough merit points and buy anything they wanted through the Heaven's secret pillar, merit points were hard to come by and no one would use them casually. Under normal circumstances, cultivators would first go to the Heaven's Secret Commerce Alliance when they wanted to buy something because they used spirit stones to do business there. Only in some emergency situations or when they wanted to buy some rare items would cultivators use their merit points. The existence of Heaven's secret markets and Heaven's secret cities made it extremely convenient for cultivators to do business. It also gave rogue cultivators who yearned for freedom a foothold. At the same time, a large number of mortals lived in these Heaven's secret cities. This Heaven's secret market was not small. It could be said that any of the Heaven's secret market in the core circle was not small. This was because the cultivators who came and went here were all cultivators who had switched to heaven-grade techniques. Thus, transactions were very frequent. This was why the Heaven's Secret Business Alliance was so wealthy. At the entrance of the market, a young man carrying a saber stepped in. Immediately, a maid came forward to greet him. In the outer circle, these maids didn't have high cultivations, but here, their cultivations were at least 7th or 8th order. Moreover, they all had extraordinary appearances. Anyone who entered would easily feel at home. After the maid saw the young man's appearance, the smile on her face suddenly froze. However, she quickly recovered and bowed. "Greetings, senior brother. Is senior brother here to buy or sell something?" "Both." "Senior brother, please come in." After a short while, a manager of the Commerce Alliance who was in charge of transactions pushed open the door and entered. The manager wasn't young, looking to be in his 40s or 50s. However, his cultivation was only 9th order. The pure and resplendent aura around his body made him look like a veteran 9th order cultivator. It was unknown whether he had any hope of breaking through to the Cloud River realm in this lifetime. The manager cupped his fists and bowed. "Greetings, fellow Taoist Yi." In the cubicle, Lu Yi held a teacup and sipped it carefully. He was already used to being recognized at a glance. Myriad Demon Ridge had already spread his image across the entire battlefield, so how could the people of the Heaven's Secret Commerce Alliance not pay more attention to him? "What is your surname?" "This humble one's surname is Zhou." "Fellow Taoist Zhou." "Fellow Taoist Yi," said Steward Zhou, producing a bag of holding and pushing it toward Lu Yi. "Your presence brings light to the Heavenly Mystery Commerce Alliance's humble abode. It is a great honor. Please accept this small gift." Lu Yi looked at him in confusion. He had been in and out of the Tianji Business Alliance so many times, but this was the first time he had been given a gift the moment he arrived. Steward Zhou explained with a smile, "The Merchant Union is a place to do business. It can't withstand the collision of two major factions. It's also not a refuge for anyone. I hope fellow Taoist Yi can forgive us." Lu Yi knew that they had mistakenly thought that he had come to the Merchant Union to seek refuge. "I've heard of the Merchant Union's background. Steward Zhou, you don't have to belittle yourself. Moreover, the Merchant Union's Tianji City or Tianji Market has always been a place of peace. It's not like no one has come to the Merchant Union to seek refuge." "Why can't I come here?" Steward Zhou said, "People can't be compared with each other. In the past, the grudges between those people were not a big deal. However, fellow Taoist Yi, you have now involved two major factions. Of course, if fellow Taoist insists on staying here, the Merchant Union will not refuse. As long as fellow Taoist is in the Merchant Union, the Merchant Union will protect fellow Taoist's safety. No one can harm fellow Taoist here. The Merchant Union will make money peacefully, but we will not use violent means." His words were neither servile nor overbearing. It clearly showed that the Tianji Business Alliance did not want to cause trouble, but they would not be afraid of trouble either. Lu Yi had long felt that the Tianji Business Alliance's background was not simple. It could be seen from its name. In the entire 9 provinces, only this force dared to use the name Tianji. No other forces in the Grand Heaven Alliance or the Wanmo Ridge had the name Tianji. I'm not here to seek refuge. Lu Yi raised his hand and pushed the bag of holding back. Steward Zhou was stunned. Then I have misunderstood, fellow Daoist. Lu Yi took out 2 more bags of holding and a jade slip. I want to sell some things and buy some array flags and other things while I'm at it. Steward Zhou picked up the storage bag and jade slip, and after a brief inspection, the corners of his eyes couldn't help but twitch. He was shocked in his heart. Just how many people did Lu Yi kill to have such a rich and varied loot? As for the things recorded in the jade slip, it wasn't a big deal. Most of them were some common array flags. Lu Yi could buy as many as he wanted. Fellow Daoist, when do you want them? That depends on when you want me to leave. I don't want to be blocked here. I just experienced something like this a few days ago. I'm a bit traumatized. Fellow Daoist, please wait for a moment. Steward Zhou said and turned to leave. Let me borrow the Tianji pillar of the Merchant Union. Fellow Daoist, please follow me. Following Steward Zhou out of the room, he was led by a maid into the Tianji Hall of the Tianji Business Alliance. There was also a Tianji Hall in the Merchant Union. There was a Tianji pillar inside. Moreover, the Tianji pillar in the Merchant Union was not restricted to any camp or alliance contract. Anyone could use it. However, it was said that each use would require some merit points. Most likely, it was a usage fee. There was no one in the Tianji Hall. Lu Yi walked up to the Tianji pillar and used the mark to connect to the Tianji treasury. As expected, using the Tianji pillar of the Merchant Union to enter the Tianji treasury cost 50 merit points. Although 50 merit points were not a lot, it was not a small amount either. If converted to the lives of cultivators, with Lu Ye's current cultivation base, he would need to kill a few Heaven Realm cultivators. Checking his merit points, he found that he had 9,843. This was after deducting 50 merit points from the usage fee. In order to buy the array flags in the Third Sacred Institute, he had spent what little merit points he had left. In less than 3 months, he had earned nearly 10,000 merit points. In the entire Spirit Stream battlefield, when it came to gaining merit points, there was probably no one who could compare to Lu Yi. The main reason was that he had killed enough. When he was a Heaven 7, killing a Heaven 7 would only give him 10 merit points. However, if he killed a Heaven 8, he would get 22 merit points. Killing a Heaven 9 would give him 36 merit points. The merit points gained from killing enemies of a higher realm would increase by several times. Lu Yi thought about it for a moment and spent 8,000 merit points to buy 40 Earth Core Flames. As a result, he only had 1,843 merit points left. For the current him, the greatest use of merit points was to buy Earth Core Flames and let his talent tree devour them to unlock new spirit runes. He always needed to save some merit points for emergencies, so he rarely spent all of his merit points. As soon as he walked out of the Tianji Hall, Steward Zhou was already waiting outside. In order to prevent Lu Yi from staying in the Tianji Merchant Union for too long, he was very efficient. Handing back 2 storage pouches, Steward Zhou said, "These are the array flags fellow Daoist needs. Please check them." Lu Yi opened the storage pouches and checked them. He nodded slightly. He did not calculate the value of these array flags and the items he sold. In the current situation, the Tianji Merchant Union would definitely not take advantage of him. They would be more than happy to leave as soon as possible, lest he bring trouble to them. After keeping the storage pouches, Lu Yi walked out. In the hall, a few pairs of eyes stared at him. Clearly, they were myriad Demon Ridge cultivators who had rushed over after hearing the news. There were not many of them, only 4 or 5. It had only been 5 minutes since he entered the Merchant Union, but Myriad Demon Ridge had already received the news. He could foresee that many Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators should be rushing over at this moment. If he did not leave now, he would really be surrounded again. Walking out of the Merchant Union, Lu Yi summoned his spirit vessel and channeled his spirit energy, soaring into the sky. The moment he left, the Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators followed. At the same time, a large group of Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators rushed over from outside the market and chased after him. In a split second, streams of light flashed through the air with a shocking momentum. While chasing, the Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators were constantly sending messages to their friends. "Watch out, he's coming back." Suddenly, someone exclaimed. Many Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators looked up and saw that Lu Yi had indeed turned around and brazenly charged towards them alone. Even though there were dozens of Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators gathered, they could not help but panic at this moment. The battle above the Myriad Poison Forest had made them realize how terrifying Lu Yi was. Thousands of people could not do anything to him, so how could dozens of people do anything to him now? However, it was absolutely impossible to avoid the battle. The speed of Imperial equipment was not as fast as the others. Once they avoided the battle, they would be defeated one by one. Therefore, the leader of the Heavenly Nine cultivators immediately shouted, "Fight!" Dozens of people immediately got into formation and looked nervously at the rapidly approaching figure. Imperial equipment and spells were the first to attack. Lu Yi nimbly shuttled through the attacks. The light of defensive spirit inscriptions appeared on his body from time to time, blocking the attacks that he could not avoid. 9 spirit weapons flew out from the weapon box and opened a path in front of him, quickly approaching the enemy formation. In front of him, several body cultivators blocked the front, each holding their own defensive spirit weapons with a serious expression. Lu Ye's figure crashed into the body cultivator with the lowest cultivation level. At the same time, a long saber with flames wrapped around it slashed down. The body cultivator instantly fell down like a meteorite from the sky. Lu Ye's figure was not hindered at all. He directly passed through the enemy formation and swung his mountain saber, drawing a string of blood. At the same time he passed through the enemy formation, several people followed the body cultivator's figure and fell down. In one exchange, several people died. The dozens of Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators' expressions became more and more serious. The Heavenly Nine cultivator shouted in a low voice, "Don't panic, he can't last more than a few times." Although a few people had died on their side, Lu Yi had also suffered a lot of attacks in the short exchange just now. However, they were all blocked by the defensive spirit inscriptions, so he was unscathed. However, this kind of battle consumed a lot of his spiritual power. The Heavenly Nine cultivators were not fools. They naturally knew that Lu Yi could not be so brave all the time. Moreover, if they could delay Lu Yi here and wait for more of their companions to arrive, it would be worth it to die a few people. Chapter 388. Just as cultivator Tianjiu's voice fell, Lu Yi once again changed directions to attack. The same scene as before appeared again. The attacks of dozens of people were unable to do anything to him. Most of the Imperial equipment and spells were dodged by him, and only a small number of them hit him. They were even blocked by the defensive spirit inscriptions, leaving him unharmed. The figure wrapped in scorching spirit energy passed through the formation again, and several people died under his saber or weapon. In midair, Lu Yi paused and looked down at his spirit boat. He almost couldn't dodge an attack just now, and it left a dent on the spirit boat. Fortunately, it didn't affect the overall performance of the spirit boat. This kind of small air transportation spirit boat didn't have much defensive power. If it was hit by too many attacks in a short period of time, it would definitely not be able to withstand it. In such a situation, if Lu Yi didn't have an air transportation spirit boat, he could only wait for death. The Myriad Demon Ridge cultivators on the other side obviously noticed this and whispered to each other. They could only attack Lu Ye's air transportation spirit boat if he got closer. If they could really destroy Lu Ye's air transportation spirit boat, it would be a great merit. Just as they were thinking this, Lu Yi raised his hand and pointed. From hundreds of feet away, scorching spirit energy condensed into the figure of a fire phoenix, which flapped its wings and pounced toward them. The dozens of cultivators hurriedly blocked it together. However, as soon as he blocked the first fire phoenix technique, a second one followed closely behind, and a third one followed closely behind. The attacks were endless and unending. Every single spell technique was extraordinarily powerful. The scorching heat caused the space around them to twist and warp, sending sparks flying in all directions. The myriad Demon Ridge cultivators were shocked. For a moment, they couldn't figure out whether Lu Yi was a weapon cultivator or a spell cultivator. Even a 9th-level spell cultivator couldn't cast spells as fast as him. Moreover, the power of this spell was ridiculously strong. What shocked them even more was that with the cover of the Fire Phoenix technique, there were also Imperial weapons waiting for an opportunity to attack. It was impossible to guard against. The dense and solid defense line was broken, and the Imperial weapons took the opportunity to shuttle through, causing endless screams. In just a moment, more than 10 people were killed. With fewer people, the defense power was greatly reduced. Seeing Lu Yi pouncing over, the 9th-level cultivator couldn't hold on anymore and shouted, "Run!" When he finished speaking, he was the first to run out. When the remaining myriad Demons Ridge cultivators saw this, they all scattered and fled in all directions. Lu Yi was about to give chase when he saw a large number of flowing lights rushing over from afar. It was obvious that the reinforcements of the myriad Demons Ridge had arrived. He had no choice but to leave first. Led by the Spirit Stream List's first ranker from the Tao Profound sect, the Leaf Eliminating Alliance began to operate strictly. Messages were constantly being sent out in all directions. Once someone discovered Lu Ye's whereabouts, the nearby cultivators of the Leaf Removal Alliance would immediately rush over, not giving him any time to breathe. Over the next few days, Lu Yi and the cultivators of the Leaf Eradication League had engaged in several dozen battles of varying sizes. On average, there were 7 or 8 battles every day. If there weren't many enemies, Lu Yi would try his best to kill them. If there were too many, he would flee first. The Yi League had lost a lot of people, including many Heaven Level 9 cultivators. In a mountain forest, a large number of cultivators were searching back and forth in the sky. There were even cultivators on the ground who were searching for Lu Ye's whereabouts. Under the operation of the Leaf Eradication League's huge manpower, even if Lu Yi could temporarily shake off the pursuit, it would be difficult for him to hide for long. The entire core region of the myriad Demons Ridge's cultivators now prioritized killing Lu Yi. As for everything else, it was all set aside. An hour ago, a group of people from the Leaf Eradication League had encountered Lu Yi. After a great battle, Lu Yi fled, and the Leaf Eradication League lost track of him. What was certain was that he was still in this area. As for where exactly he was hiding, they still had to search. To be honest, Lu Ye's performance over the past few days had shocked all the cultivators of the myriad Demons Ridge. Not to mention his ridiculously strong strength, he had the ability to kill Heaven Level 9 cultivators when he was at the Heaven Level 7. Now that he was at the Heaven Level 8, ordinary Heaven Level 9 cultivators were no match for him. What puzzled the myriad Demons Ridge even more was his endurance. Lu Yi had just advanced to the Heaven Level 8, and should only have a little more than 300 opened apertures. The spiritual power in his body was limited, and he had almost no time to recover over the past few days. How could he have persisted? Even if he was at the Cloud River tier, he should have been exhausted. But in fact, in the battle an hour ago, Lu Yi was still at ease, but he looked a little tired. What was certain was that no matter what method he used to recover his spiritual power, after dozens of battles over the past few days, he should be an arrow at the end of its flight. So today was the day to kill Lu Yi. In a hidden cave in the forest, Lu Yi set up a teleportation array. The myriad Demons Ridge's decision was correct. Lu Yi was indeed an arrow at the end of its flight. He only felt physically and mentally exhausted. Even if he could swallow spiritual pills without limit to replenish his spiritual power, this kind of high-frequency and high-intensity battle made his spiritual power unable to make ends meet. At this moment, he had less than 20% of his spiritual power left. Although he still had the strength to fight, he was not in the mood to do so. After several days of battle, even if he had defensive spiritual tattoos, he would inevitably be injured. Moreover, his spirit boat was about to be scrapped. If a spirit stream tier cultivator did not have a flying spiritual tool, in such a situation, it was no different from waiting for death. Therefore, he had to hurry back to the Forest of 1,000 Poisons to recuperate. This place was less than 50 miles away from the periphery of the Forest of 1,000 Poisons. It was less than 100 miles away from the teleportation array he had left behind. If everything went well, he could teleport back. In fact, Lu Yi could choose to kill his way back to the Forest of 1,000 Poisons. He could kill his way out of the Forest of 1,000 Poisons, so he naturally had the ability to do so. However, if he did so, his whereabouts would be exposed. At that time, the myriad demons' ridge would surround the Forest of 1,000 Poisons, and he would have to go through some trouble the next time he came out. If he used the teleportation array, he would not have to worry about this. No one would know where he went. It could be said that no one would know. When he arrived at the Forest of 1,000 Poisons to recuperate, the myriad demons' ridge cultivators would still have to search for him like headless flies. This feeling of playing with thousands of enemies in the palm of his hand was quite good. The array flags were set down and the frame of the teleportation array was constructed. Lu Yi then urged his spiritual power to perfect the internal structure of the array. With the void spiritual tattoos as the core, he made some adjustments. Standing in the teleportation array, Lu Yi urged his spiritual power to activate the array. The next moment, he had a feeling that the array under his feet was resonating with another array in the distance. Everything went smoothly. The child array under his feet established a connection with the mother array in the Forest of 1,000 Poisons. However, when he recalled the feeling of being teleported, Lu Ye's expression became slightly bitter. Gritting his teeth, he completely activated the array. His mind suddenly sank. The feeling of stepping into a bottomless abyss and constantly falling down appeared again. At the same time, a powerful pressure came from all around his body. It was as if an invisible hand was constantly rubbing him flat and round. Throughout this process, he was completely powerless to resist. He could only urge his spiritual power to protect himself. That feeling was indescribable in just a few words. Almost the moment Lu Yi activated the child teleportation array, a group of myriad demons' ridge cultivators patrolling in the sky sensed the spiritual power fluctuations here. Soon, the news spread in all directions, and the surrounding cultivators quickly gathered. In just a moment, the hidden entrance of the cave was filled with cultivators. Even the sky was covered in an inescapable net, waiting for Lu Yi to appear and kill him here. "Are you sure he's here?" a Tianjiu cultivator suddenly asked. The cultivator who first discovered the movement here replied, "Our people haven't entered this place, but there are spiritual power fluctuations here. It should be Lu Yi without a doubt. There doesn't seem to be the aura of a living person. Should I go in and take a look?" A burly body cultivator asked. "Be careful of traps." The Tianjiu cultivator shook his head, that Lu Yi is proficient in array Dao. "If we rashly enter, we might fall into his trap. Is there anyone from the Beast Tamer school here?" "I'm Yan Shi." An unremarkable cultivator stepped forward. "Let's check the situation inside." Yan Shi nodded and took out a cat-like mechanical creation from her storage pouch. She urged her spiritual power to activate it, and the cat nimbly rushed into the cave. The next moment, violent spiritual power fluctuations came from inside, as if something had exploded. Fierce flames spewed out from the cave entrance, causing the group of cultivators to tremble in fear. They inwardly cursed Lu Yi for being treacherous. This really was a trap. If Yanshi hadn't sent the mechanical beast in to scout the way, no one would have had a good ending. Fortunately, they were cautious enough to have Yanshi send the mechanical beast to scout the way. Are there any array cultivators? The Tianjiu cultivator asked again. This time, many people stepped forward. He casually pointed to a few. Follow me in and take a look. Under his lead, the group of people stepped into the cave. Soon, they walked out again. They didn't find many useful clues inside. The only thing they could be sure of was that Lu Yi had indeed stayed inside and laid down an explosion array. As for the rest, they couldn't see anything because the explosion array had already turned the place into a mess. Even the array flags left behind had been completely destroyed. An hour ago, the myriad demon ridge lost track of Lu Yi, and then he stopped here. So here came the question, where was he now? The myriad demon ridge cultivators sealed off this area. No matter how powerful Lu Yi was, he couldn't escape. But they couldn't find him. This puzzled the group of people from the myriad devil ridge. In the end, they could only conclude that Lu Yi probably had some concealment method to avoid their detection. Things had become tricky. If Lu Yi really had such an incredible concealment method, how could they find him? At the same time, in the depths of the myriad poison forest, Lu Yi's figure suddenly appeared in the poisonous miasma. As expected, there was some deviation in the teleportation. He didn't teleport to the mother formation, but he shouldn't be too far away. At this moment, his feet were suspended in midair. As soon as he appeared, his body fell rapidly. He was more than 30 meters from the ground. This height was still bearable for Lu Yi. Chapter 389. In midair, Lu Yi hurriedly adjusted his body and landed awkwardly. His legs went soft and he knelt on one knee with a thud. Aya! Someone in front of him exclaimed, "Why are you being so courteous all of a sudden?" Hearing the voice, Lu Yi's eyes twitched. He looked up and saw Hua Xi looking at him with a smile. "Give me a hand, I can't stand up." A moment later, Lu Yi settled down on the third floor of the wooden house. He had already fallen into a deep sleep while Hua Xi was healing him. He had been fighting non-stop for the past few days without much time to rest. He was truly exhausted. The wooden house in the forest of 1,000 poisons had truly become a refuge. When he went out, he was surrounded by enemies. Wherever he went, he would be hunted down by a group of people from the myriad devil ridge. Only when he returned here could he truly relax. When he woke up, he heard light snoring. It seemed that something was pressing down on him. Lu Yi looked up and saw Hupa curled up and sleeping on his chest. Lu Yi raised his hand and grabbed Hupa's neck. He dragged Hupa to the side and sat up. His thoughts drifted, he was in a daze. An alluring aroma floated in from outside. It seemed that someone was cooking something delicious. Lu Yi came back to his senses and was stimulated by the aroma. His stomach rumbled. He changed into a clean set of clothes and dressed neatly. He walked down from the third floor and came to the small courtyard. There was an additional table in the courtyard. The table was filled with dishes and there was a stove beside it. Yi and Hua Xi were chatting and laughing as they busied themselves. Lu Yi crossed his arms and leaned against the door. He looked at Yi who was adding firewood and Hua Xi who was wearing an apron and a headscarf as she busied herself in front of the stove. He suddenly felt that the human world was indeed a good place. "Lu Yi, you're awake." Yi saw Lu Yi and called out in joy. Hua Xi turned around and met Lu Yi's eyes. She smiled gently, "Are you hungry? Sit down and eat." Lu Yi walked to the table and sat down on a stool. He picked up his chopsticks and looked at the many dishes in front of him. He hesitated for a moment. In the end, he decided to try a plate of mushrooms first. At least he could recognize that plate as mushrooms. He couldn't recognize anything else. The only thing he was sure of was that everything on the table came from the forest of 1,000 poisons. Most people wouldn't be able to afford such a table of food. After taking a bite of the mushroom, Lu Yi raised her eyebrows. The texture was unexpectedly delicious. She looked inside her source spiritual cavity. As expected, the talent tree was burning with a large amount of gray smoke. Her appetite was completely aroused. Lu Yi didn't care about the true nature of the ingredients and casually ate them. Hua Xiai quickly brought a plate of food to the table and sat across from him. She ate slowly, occasionally putting food in Lu Ye's bowl. Yi couldn't eat, so she stood behind Lu Yi and combed his messy hair. After a hearty meal, Lu Yi reclined on the chair, rubbing his belly and crossing his legs. Yi served him tea and served him well. The tiredness from the past few days was swept away. He had to admit that the things Hua Xiai made were a little poisonous, but they were really nutritious. In the first few days when he had been recuperating here, Hua Xiai had used all sorts of methods to nourish him until he had a nosebleed. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, he didn't want to move for a while. Lu Yi said, "Yi, help me get the storage bags from upstairs." This time, he killed a lot of people and brought back a lot of storage bags. He didn't have the time to open them before, but now he could use them to pass the time. Okay. Yi floated up to the third floor and quickly returned with a lot of storage bags. Then it was time to see what was inside. Yi liked to see Lu Yi open the storage bags the most. Because before they were opened, no one knew what was inside. Often, some storage bags could bring inexplicable surprises. One by one, the storage pouches were opened. Yi took out all the items from the storage pouches and categorized them. When she saw the good stuff in the storage pouches, she would smile from ear to ear. If there was a storage pouch that didn't have many treasures, she would mutter that the pouch was a pauper. Everyone's degree of wealth was different. For Lu Yi, except for the first few months of cultivation, he basically didn't have to worry about cultivation resources. He always had an endless supply of spirit stones and elixirs. But for most cultivators, life could only be considered casual. Because most cultivators couldn't accumulate wealth by killing enemies like Lu Yi. Since the beginning of cultivation, cultivators had been consuming cultivation resources. Needless to say, spirit pills, spirit stones, and other things were not enough. When one's cultivation was low, these things weren't enough. If one had some surplus, they would buy a few spirit talismans as life-saving treasures. When one reached the 7th order, they would consider buying imperial equipment. When one reached the 8th order, they would consider buying a flight-type spirit artifact. When one reached the 9th order, they would need to buy a heaven-grade secret art. Looking at the entire spirit stream realm, the inner circle cultivators were actually the poorest group of people, because there were too many things to buy at this stage. When one reached the core circle, the situation was slightly better, but as one's cultivation increased, so did the consumption of cultivation resources. Many people lived a bitter life. Other than a few spirit tools for personal use, there weren't many spirit pills and spirit stones in his storage bag. This was also the reason why the myriad Demon Ridge cultivators were so eager to kill Lu Yi. On one hand, they really felt the threat Lu Yi posed to the myriad Demon Ridge, and on the other hand, the benefits of killing Lu Yi were too great. As long as they could kill Lu Yi, even if the reward was divided equally among all the participants, it was enough to make any spirit stream realm cultivator rich overnight. The world was bustling with activity, and all was for profit. Half an hour later, the storage bag was opened. Leaving Yi there, Lu Yi walked to the mother transmission array. Because this mother transmission array was arranged with array flags, and because Lu Ye's cultivation was still low, he wasn't skilled in arranging it, so it wasn't stable enough. Every time he used it, he had to rearrange it. Looking at the mother transmission array in front of him, Lu Yi had a headache. He didn't know if it was because of his technique or his lack of experience, but the location of the transmission array was always a little off. When he tested it before, it was fine, as the location of the deviation wasn't too far away from the mother transmission array. This time, it was a little ridiculous. He was sent back from 100 kilometers away, about 500 meters away from the mother transmission array. The deviation was huge, and he even appeared in mid-air. He could still withstand a height of 100 meters, but what if it was 100 meters? He must be in poor condition to be sent back from the outside. If he couldn't even control his flying spirit tool, wouldn't he fall to his death? But he really didn't have a good solution now, so he could only do his best to arrange the mother transmission array, and hope that the next time he used it, the deviation would be less. He was busy. While he was leisurely and contentedly in the myriad poisons forest, the Yi Alliance was busy without end. The area where Lu Yi had last appeared had already been turned upside down by a large number of cultivators, but no matter how hard they searched, they couldn't find even a single strand of hair. Lu Yi had mysteriously disappeared just like that. On the third floor of the wooden house, Lu Yi swallowed spirit pills to recover his spirit chi while urging the talent tree to devour the earth core fire he bought from the Tianji treasure house. This time, he bought 40 earth core fire, and he didn't know what kind of spirit runes he would get, so he was looking forward to it. Looking at the talent tree now, a large number of leaves were burning. Not to mention the lifelike fire phoenix at the top of the tree, Lu Yi had mastered nearly 20 of the ordinary spirit runes. It was undeniable that many of these spirit runes were not suitable for battle, but there were many that could be used, which allowed him to use more flexible methods when fighting with enemies. He was able to kill a cultivator of the Nine Heavens realm with a thunderous method. He relied not only on his own pure spiritual power and deep foundation, but also on the spirit patterns that he quietly activated when fighting with the enemy. These spirit patterns made his fighting methods unpredictable and impossible to guard against. 2 days later, Lu Yi had completely recovered, and even opened 2 more spirit apertures. Now, he was only a few dozen spirit apertures away from Heaven 9. Once he reached Heaven 9, there should be no one in the spirit stream battlefield who could threaten his safety. He was confident. Perhaps it was because of the continuous battles that had caused him to be constantly on the move, but he had suddenly been idle for 2 days, which made Lu Yi somewhat uncomfortable. Moreover, at this time, some unpleasant rumors had reached his ears through the transmission of some good friends. The myriad Devil Ridge had not been able to find any trace of him, and had probably become impatient. Therefore, they had spread many unpleasant words, such as that Lu Yi was a coward and so on, in an attempt to force him to show himself. Lu Yi had no plans to leave the myriad poison forest for the time being. Therefore, after ending the transmission with his good friends, he thought for a moment, and stopped his cultivation. Then, he activated the battlefield imprint and linked it to the spirit stream list. Now, he had the qualifications to challenge the spirit stream list. No matter what, he had fallen from the 33rd place of the spirit stream list. He had not challenged it before, firstly, because he was not in the mood, and secondly, because he wanted to obtain more rewards from the spirit stream list. There were benefits to being on the spirit stream list. As long as he stayed on the spirit stream list for a month, Heaven's Secret would bestow him some real benefits. The spirit stream list only had 100 people, so it was naturally not easy to stay on it for a month, especially for the cultivators at the bottom of the list. It was common to see the last few people on the list change several times within a day. The situation of those at the top of the list was slightly better. Even if they were challenged and fell from the list, they would still have the opportunity to rush up again. What Lu Yi needed to do now was to challenge the spirit stream list and stand firmly on it for a month. His 4th senior brother had told him that the benefits bestowed by Heaven's Secret were very useful. The higher one's ranking was, the greater the benefits. Therefore, if he had the chance, he had to do his best to attack the spirit stream list and occupy a place there. Furthermore, he had to reach the highest position he could occupy in the shortest time possible. Lu Yi gave it a try, and found that he could only challenge the last 3 people on the list. They were all cultivators from the 9th heaven, and came from different sections. Among them, the 99th and 98th place were from the myriad Devil Ridge, and the one in the top 100 was from the Grand Heaven Alliance. Naturally, he wanted to challenge the myriad Devil Ridge. He immediately activated the battlefield imprint and issued a challenge to the guy in the 99th place. Chapter 390. Unless it was absolutely necessary, cultivators from the same camp would not challenge each other, as it would be easy for the opposing cultivators to take advantage of the situation. Lu Yi chose to challenge the guy ranked 99th, but the information he received from the mark surprised him. That person was currently being challenged. Naturally, one person could not accept two challenges at the same time. If Lu Yi really wanted to challenge that person, he would have to finish his battle first. He changed his target to the one ranked 98th, who was also being challenged. The last three people on the spirit stream list seemed to be quite busy. From the looks of it, if one did not have enough strength to reach the top of the list, even if they were lucky enough to enter the spirit stream list, they would quickly be beaten down. Just as Lu Yi was about to wait, the 100th name on the spirit stream list suddenly distorted and disappeared. Then, another person's name appeared on it. The original 100th name had been replaced. Lu Yi quickly checked the camp of the new person on the list, and after confirming that he was from the myriad Devil Ridge, he immediately issued a challenge. This time, there was no information that the person was being challenged. Not long after, that person accepted the challenge. If he did not accept, Lu Yi would replace him. His opponent had just challenged someone else and entered the spirit stream list, so he would definitely need some time to recover. Therefore, although he accepted the challenge, the battle did not immediately begin. Since he had nothing to do, Lu Yi swallowed some spirit pills to cultivate while letting the talent tree continue to devour the earth core fire. At the same time, he divided his attention to study the spirit stream list. His understanding of the spirit stream list was based on hearsay. Although he had reached the 33rd position in the past, it had only taken him 3 days to get off the list. Therefore, he wasn't too clear on the details of the list. Time flew by, and 2 hours passed. The battlefield mark received a message, and Lu Yi immediately stopped what he was doing and prepared for battle. Suddenly, a heavenly secret descended and enveloped him. The space around Lu Yi began to distort, and his vision changed as a large amount of white light filled his vision. When the white light dissipated, he suddenly saw a figure not far away. It was a man in his early 20s, who should be the target of this challenge. Ah, eh. A strange sound came from beside him. Lu Yi turned his head and saw Hupa and Yi standing beside him. They were looking around curiously. One of them was sleeping while the other was cultivating. It was unknown how they had suddenly appeared here. Lu Yi, what is this place? Yi asked. Let's talk later. Lu Yi turned to look at the other side. The myriad demons' rich cultivators had shocked expressions on their faces. They looked at Lu Yi and Yi, then at Hupa. No matter how hard they racked their brains, they couldn't understand how a one-on-one duel had turned into a group fight. During the Spirit Stream List challenge, it was understandable that a cultivator would bring along a pet that had formed a pet contract with them. There were cultivators from the beast taming school on the Spirit Stream List, and they had more than one pet beast with them. But to have two enemies involved at the same time was a bit ridiculous. Just as he was about to ask about the situation, he suddenly noticed that Lu Ye's appearance was very familiar. Taking a closer look, wasn't this the guy their camp had been searching for all this time? Other than the Leaf Alliance, a large number of cultivators were still searching for him in the area where he had disappeared. However, this fellow had actually come to challenge the Spirit Stream List. Lu Ye. The Myriad Demons Ridge cultivator shouted in a low voice. For a moment, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. A moving treasure trove had appeared in front of him out of nowhere. If he could kill him here, then all the benefits would be his. However, this fellow's strength was astonishing. Although he had barely made it onto the Spirit Stream List, he didn't have the confidence to win this battle. As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Yi had already rushed towards him. The Myriad Demons Ridge cultivator cursed inwardly. Because he was a weapon cultivator, he had deliberately chosen a very small space when choosing the location of the battle. There was nothing in this space except for a fighting stage with a radius of a few dozen meters. Such a small space was undoubtedly very suitable for a weapon cultivator to display their strength. However, Lu Yi was also a weapon cultivator. In such an environment, both sides would be able to gain the same advantage. With the support of Windwalk, his figure became light and graceful, leaving behind afterimages as he closed the distance of a few dozen meters between them. This speed, the myriad demon's ridge cultivator's eyes twitched. He raised his hand and summoned his spiritual weapon. Although he knew that he was no match for Lu Yi, he was still a cultivator on the spirit stream list. No matter what, he still needed to exchange a few blows to get a feel for Lu Yi's strength. Whooshing sounds could be heard as Lu Yi charged forward. 9 streams of light shot out from the weapon box, forming a straight line that seemed to chase after the stars and moon. The myriad demon's ridge cultivator had long since heard of Lu Yi's ability to control spiritual weapons. He immediately took out a golden body talisman and slapped it onto his body, urging all of his spiritual power to protect himself. Roar! A heaven-shaking tiger roar could be heard, and a visible shockwave swept towards the myriad demon's ridge cultivator. When the shockwave hit him, he felt as if someone had smashed him in the head with a hammer. His head hurt, and he saw stars. His spiritual power seemed to dissipate for a moment. He was greatly shocked. Lu Yi's white tiger actually had such divine power. Just as he steadied his mind, a barrage of magical techniques flew towards him from the side. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the girl who had come in with Lu Yi. Her spiritual power surged, and one magical technique after another rapidly formed, shooting towards him as if they were free. Her casting speed was incredibly fast, and there were many types of magical techniques. It was a dazzling sight. Rumbling sounds could be heard as one magical technique after another fell. Even though the myriad demon's ridge cultivator did his best to dodge, he was still hit. The golden light on his body dimmed at a visible rate. A great sense of crisis welled up in his heart. He hurriedly opened his mouth. Before he could say the last word, the flying imperial equipment had already broken through his golden body talisman and protective spiritual energy. It tore through the armor he was wearing and brought out a string of blood from his body. The powerful impact forced that person back again and again, causing him to shake violently. Lu Yi rushed in front of him and unsheathed his coiling mountain blade. He raised his hand and slashed down. As he passed by, a huge head flew into the sky. Blood spurted out from the headless neck, causing a rain of blood to fall. Several meters away, Lu Yi shook off the bloodstains on his coiling mountain blade and sheathed it. So weak. Ever since he had reached the 7th heaven and entered the core region, he had killed many 9th heaven cultivators. However, this was the first time he had killed a 9th heaven cultivator of the spirit stream list. The feeling he got from his opponent was that he was very weak, unable to withstand a single blow. Although Hupa and Yi had participated in this battle, the level of his opponent's performance had disappointed Lu Yi. Ever since he had entered the core region, Lu Yi had always been besieged. He had never fought one-on-one. The challenge of the spirit stream list was the best opportunity for him. This way, he would be able to test the gap between himself and the other spirit stream list cultivators. Since he had chosen to challenge the spirit stream list, he naturally had to follow his 4th senior brother's instructions and reach the highest position in the shortest time possible. Yi stepped forward and collected the person's storage pouch and spiritual artifact. Then, she said, Lu Yi, is this the spirit stream list challenge? When she had first appeared, she hadn't been able to react. Only now did she realize what was going on. Lu Yi had not expected that both Yi and Hupo would be sent here to participate in the challenge. However, strictly speaking, Hupo was his pet beast. As a weapon cultivator, bringing a pet beast to participate in the challenge of the spirit stream list was reasonable. It was also permitted by Heaven's secret. Yi was also Hu Po's pet beast, so she had naturally followed him. This allowed him to gain a lot of advantages. "Let's go out," Lu Yi said. As Heaven's Secret descended, his vision blurred and he returned to the wooden house. Yi floated in through the window and landed in front of him, sitting down obediently. Hu Po also jumped onto his lap and waited quietly. The two little ones obviously knew that Lu Yi would not give up, and would accompany him to challenge the spirit stream list. Lu Yi once again activated the battlefield imprint and linked it to the spirit stream list. He tried to challenge the 99th rank, but failed. He could only settle for the next best thing, which was the 98th rank. This time, however, he succeeded. What surprised Lu Yi was that his opponent didn't make him wait for too long. After only an hour, Heaven's Secret descended and sent him into a small space. The terrain of the battle this time was similar to the last time. It was a small space with a radius of only a few dozen meters. Cultivators who would choose this kind of space were either weapon cultivators or body cultivators. This was because only cultivators from these two schools would choose this kind of terrain suitable for close combat. For example, magical cultivators or ghost cultivators would definitely choose a terrain with a large area. The white light in his vision dissipated, and Lu Yi immediately looked ahead. He saw a tall and sturdy cultivator across from him. As expected, he was a body cultivator. At that moment, the body cultivator frowned and looked at Lu Yi. Just now, he seemed to have vaguely seen a figure flash by. However, Heaven's Secret's teleportation process would cause a large amount of white light to fill his vision, so he wasn't sure if he had seen wrongly. The figure that had flashed by was naturally Yi. At that moment, she had already hidden herself underground to avoid being discovered. Lu Yi was fighting 2 against 1, which would increase his psychological pressure for no reason. Furthermore, with Yi hidden herself, it would be easier for her to launch a sneak attack at any time. The body cultivator had already activated his spiritual power, and his entire body was brimming with qi and blood. A spirit tool shield hung from his left arm, while his right hand held a spiked mallet. The mallet's surface was covered with sharp barbs. If it smashed into him, he would definitely suffer. The body cultivator raised the shield in front of him and used the spiked mallet to knock on his shield. The sound of his knocking was very clear. He even said, "Come over here, Grand Sky Alliance is little." Before he could finish speaking, he suddenly looked at Lu Yi and said in surprise, "Sect exterminating Yi?" Lu Yi had already rushed towards him. Chapter 391. As usual, the 9 streaks of light slammed into the spirit artifact shield of the body cultivator one after another. The tremendous impact caused the cultivator's body to tremble violently, and the luster of the spirit artifact shield quickly dimmed. The body cultivator was shocked. He knew very well how strong his spirit artifact shield's defense was, yet it had lost so much of its spirituality in such a short time. It was clear to see how strong the opponent's attack was. After the 9 streaks of light, Lu Yi was already in front of the weapon cultivator. The mountain saber in his hand slashed down like lightning, slashing onto the shield. At the same time, the heavy pressure spirit inscriptions were activated. In an instant, a tremendous pressure descended from the sky. The body cultivator felt as if a mountain was pressing down on his shield. He forced himself not to retreat, but his body shrank and he almost knelt on the ground. He madly circulated his spirit energy, his face flushed red and his muscles bulging. With a furious roar, he pushed the shield forward and smashed down with the hammer in his hand. The streaks of light from the spirit artifact attacked from the side and collided with his hammer, causing it to brush past Lu Ye's body and smash down. The battle arena shook with a boom, and cracks appeared on the ground. Lu Ye's long saber pierced forward, the spirit energy around him boiling. With his Celestial 8 cultivation and the support of the double-edged spirit inscriptions, this attack exploded with unimaginable power. The luster of the spirit artifact shield was immediately extinguished, and with a crash, the shield shattered. Seeing the long saber covered in flames slashing down at him, the body cultivator's expression turned to one of horror, and he instinctively wanted to admit defeat. However, at that moment, Hoopa, who had been crouching on Lu Ye's shoulder without moving, suddenly opened his mouth and roared. A sound wave visible to the naked eye swept towards the body cultivator. The body cultivator's thoughts were thrown into disarray, and he couldn't shout out the words on the tip of his tongue. The long saber slashed down, and blood splattered everywhere. The body cultivator's burly figure staggered twice before crashing to the ground. His eyes were wide open, and he died with remaining grievances. He knew he wasn't Lu Ye's match, but he was a body cultivator after all. There was always a chance for him to admit defeat, but he didn't expect Hoopa to destroy that last chance. Under the soul-sucking tiger roar, he lost his last chance at life. Yi's figure appeared. Finished. Unhappy. She didn't even have time to attack. Tidying up the spoils of war, he left this place under the teleportation of Tianji. After returning to his wooden hut, Lu Yi checked the spirit stream list. He was currently ranked 98th, and could challenge 5 people above him. Therefore, the limit he could challenge was the person ranked 93rd. However, he didn't do that. Instead, he chose to challenge the guy who was ranked 95th. The reason why he didn't challenge the people ranked 96th and 97th was because they were from the Grand Heaven Alliance. Ever since he had entered the core region, the myriad demon ridge had been targeting him in all sorts of ways. If not for his strength, he would have died many times over. It was impossible to say that he did not have any resentment. Who didn't have a temper when they were in their prime? Previously, he had killed his way out of the forest of 1,000 poisons because he wanted to buy some array flags as backup. Secondly, he wanted to kill some people from the Myriad Devil Ridge to vent his anger. However, it was risky to fight against the entire Myriad Devil Ridge by himself. The challenge of the Spirit Stream list was a very good opportunity. This challenge was always a one-on-one battle, so Lu Yi didn't have to worry about being ganged up on. He decided to kill them one by one. He wanted to not see the name of a single Myriad Devil's Ridge cultivator wherever he went. Since he was being targeted, he might as well target each other. The cultivator ranked 95th wasn't that busy. Lu Yi issued a challenge and it was quickly accepted. After Heavenly Secret sent him to the small space of the battle, Yi hid herself as usual. Hoopa crouched on Lu Ye's shoulder. He looked around and found that he was in a large desert. The scorching sun was high in the sky, and the environment was extremely hot. Looking around, he could only see yellow sand dancing in the air. There were no other colors, and he couldn't see the guy ranked 95th. This guy was probably a Dharma cultivator who cultivated a fire or earth-type spell. Lu Yi concluded that, otherwise, he wouldn't have chosen such a terrain. He was too lazy to look for the enemy, so he simply stood there and waited. After a while, Yi sent a message saying that she had found traces of that person. As expected, the other party was indeed a Dharma cultivator. The Myriad Devil Ridge's camp was in an uproar. A large number of cultivators from the Yi Alliance searched for traces of the sect exterminating Yi, but they had found nothing so far. No one knew where he was hiding. It was as if he had disappeared into thin air. However, on the Spirit Stream list, the name of the Jade Blood sect's Lu Yi appeared again. This guy had actually started to challenge the list. At first, only a small number of people knew about this, but the news quickly spread. For a time, countless people paid attention to the Spirit Stream list. They watched as his ranking continued to rise. When they first noticed him, he was only ranked 95th. However, in just half a day, he had risen to 82nd, and in another half a day, he was ranked 73rd. On the second day, he was ranked 65th. The speed at which his ranking rose on the Spirit Stream list was ridiculously fast, and he didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. If it weren't for the fact that he was often challenged by people who asked him to wait for 4 hours, his ranking would have risen even faster. The waiting time of the challenges greatly delayed his rhythm. What made the Myriad Devil Ridge even angrier was that Lu Ye's challenges were one by one. He didn't let go of any of the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who were ranked higher than him. None of the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who had fought with him had survived. They were all killed by him. This led to a strange phenomenon. The 20 people ranked lower than him were all from the Grand Heaven Alliance. This was something that was impossible to happen in the past. The Myriad Devil Ridge and the Grand Heaven Alliance had produced many talented people. It was basically impossible for 4 or 5 people to be from the same alliance to appear on the Spirit Stream list. However, when Lu Yi started to challenge the list, this unimaginable phenomenon appeared. There was no other reason. All the Myriad Demons Ridge cultivators who were supposed to be in the midst of the Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators were killed. For a time, many Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators were filled with righteous indignation, and some expected better from them. He couldn't understand why these experts, who were hailed as future pillars of the world, were so useless. Even if they weren't Lu Ye's match, they should at least have the time to admit defeat. How could Lu Ye defeat them all in one fell swoop? Lu Ye's actions were undoubtedly aimed at the Myriad Devil Ridge and slapped them in the face. If this list had been arranged by someone, it would have been easy to deal with. They could have just removed it, so as to avoid being humiliated. However, the Spirit Stream list was something that was created by the heavens, and no one could interfere with it. Any Spirit Stream stage cultivator with enough strength could investigate it. Such a list was undoubtedly a disgrace to the Myriad Devil Ridge. Every Myriad Devil Ridge cultivator who could check the list felt a burning sensation on their face when they saw the rankings, as if they had been slapped in the face a few times. Lu Ye's crazy behavior caused the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators to feel humiliated. However, the Grand Heaven Alliance was happy to see this. People were constantly spreading the news of the changes in the Spirit Stream list. Every time Lu Ye's ranking rose, and the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators he had challenged completely disappeared from the Spirit Stream list, it would cause a round of cheers. On the third day, Lu Ye's ranking had reached the 50th place. Not a single one of them could fight. This was what Lu Yi felt the most during the past few days of challenging the list. No matter what faction the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators belonged to, no matter what terrain they chose, as long as they were discovered by Lu Yi, the battle would be over in a short period of time. Moreover, with Hoopa around, those people didn't even have the chance to admit defeat. Hoopa only had one thing to do, and that was to squat on Lu Ye's shoulder. Whenever a challenged cultivator showed signs of wanting to speak, he would immediately roar. Under the tiger's roar, only death awaited. Inside the wooden house in the Myriad Poison Forest, Lu Yi was still cultivating while letting the innate skill tree devour the earth core fire. He had been busy challenging the list these past few days, so he had only consumed 20 of the earth core fire. This allowed Lu Yi to obtain 2 new spiritual tattoos. One was a golden arc, and the other was a lightning attraction. After investigating the specific information of these 2 spiritual tattoos, he found that if these 2 spiritual tattoos were constructed, they could be used as a magical technique. This time, he was walking further and further on the path of a magical cultivator. However, because his spirit energy was fire elemental and metal elemental, if he constructed these 2 spiritual tattoos to activate a magical technique, it might be different from a normal magical technique. These 2 spiritual tattoos were best used to set up some killing arrays as they would have some unique effects. He had already issued a challenge to the person ranked 48th. Although the other party had accepted the challenge, they didn't start immediately and would probably have to wait for another 4 hours. Lu Yi took out a portion of the earth core fire and let the innate skill tree devour it. He also diverted some of his attention to cultivate. The 20 portions of earth core fire were quickly devoured. Lu Yi looked at the innate skill tree expectantly, wanting to know what other new spiritual tattoos he could obtain. He was slightly stunned when he took a look. That was because there were no new leaves burning. However, in a certain area of the innate skill tree, there was a large patch of leaves glowing red. He had experienced this situation once before. It was when he devoured the true phoenix fire in the land of fire. At that time, when he was devouring the true phoenix fire, a large patch of leaves also reacted at the same time. It was only when the true phoenix fire was completely devoured that those leaves all burned, outlining the figure of a vermilion bird standing on the treetops. Then, he obtained the fire phoenix spiritual tattoo. Now that a similar situation had occurred again, this was probably another special spiritual tattoo. Lu Yi carefully checked and found that there weren't as many leaves as the fire phoenix spiritual tattoo. There were only about 10 leaves. Even so, it was still very impressive. Ever since he obtained the fire phoenix spiritual tattoo, Lu Yi was especially looking forward to the appearance of this special spiritual tattoo. This special spiritual tattoo was far more powerful than ordinary spiritual tattoo. The arrangement of the leaves glowing red on the innate skill tree wasn't messy and disorderly. Instead, it was symmetrical. Looking at it, if the symmetrical leaves were linked together, it would look like a pair of wings. Lu Yi was instantly energized. Could it be? It was very possible. After devouring 20 portions of earth core fire, the dozen or so leaves glowed red. He didn't know how many more he had to devour before they burned completely. Now that Lu Yi was nowhere to be found on the Spirit Stream battlefield, if there was someone who could have killed him while he was fighting, then there would be no need to waste time and effort looking for him. Since he couldn't count on those ranked after the 50th place on the Spirit Stream list, he could only count on those ranked in the top 50. If he couldn't count on the top 50, then he would count on the top 10. After all, they couldn't possibly let him kill his way to the top of the Spirit Stream list, could they? There had to be someone who could defeat him and kill him. But, the man still wanted to say something, but Bai Lan had already raised her hand to cover his mouth. She said softly, "That's enough. Don't worry. Master gave me a high-grade spiritual artifact a few days ago. Its defense is extremely strong. Although I can't display the full power of this spiritual artifact with my cultivation base, I won't be in any danger." The man lowered his head to look at her earlobe. There was an extremely beautiful earring that looked like a teardrop. He suddenly understood. "So, this is the spiritual artifact that the second elder gave you." A teasing smile appeared on Bai Lan's face. "What else could it be?" "Senior brother, who do you think gave it to me?" The man smiled embarrassedly. Bai Lan reached out and tickled him. "Senior brother, how can you think of me like that?" The man quickly begged for mercy. 4 hours passed in a flash. Under the man's worried gaze, Bai Lan's figure disappeared. In a small space that was about a dozen miles in radius, the fragrance of flowers filled the air. The environment of this small space was extremely beautiful. As usual, Yi had almost immediately burrowed into the ground. After Lu Ye's vision recovered, he looked around. He didn't see any traces of his enemy. From the name on the Spirit Stream list, he guessed that his opponent this time should be a woman. The small space wasn't small, so he eliminated the possibility that his opponent was a body cultivator or a weapon cultivator. As for a medical cultivator, that was even more impossible. After the 50th place on the Spirit Stream list, there might be a few medical cultivators who cultivated in other factions. However, before the 50th place, there wasn't even a shadow of a medical cultivator. After all, a cultivator's energy was limited. If one cultivated in 2 factions at the same time, it would be impossible for them to have a strong battle prowess. Was it a magic cultivator? Or a ghost cultivator? All in all, Lu Yi had experienced 20 to 30 battles in the past few days. Other than medical cultivators, he had fought against cultivators from various sections. He had even encountered some strange sections. Originally, for a weapon cultivator, the most effective opponent was a body cultivator. Ghost cultivators were also difficult to deal with, but that was only for ordinary weapon cultivators. For Lu Yi, his physique wasn't inferior to any body cultivator at the spirit stream realm. In fact, it was even stronger. When he clashed with body cultivators, he would usually end the battle in 2 or 3 rounds. As for the ghost cultivators, whose bodies were as fragile as magic cultivators, if they dared to sneak near Lu Yi, they would have to experience what it meant to have eyes that were as bright as torches. Relatively speaking, among the factions, Lu Yi liked to meet ghost cultivators the most. That was because ghost cultivators relied on their ability to communicate with the netherworld and would take the initiative to sneak near him. Then, every ghost cultivator who sneaked near him would be killed without knowing how they were exposed. Next were magic cultivators, who were easy to kill. As long as he could break through their defenses, he would basically be able to kill them with a single slash. The task of finding the enemy's tracks was left to Yi. Lu Yi stood in place and waited quietly. At the same time, he threw a few spirit pills into his mouth and chewed them with his cheeks puffed up. Ever since he started cultivating, he had eaten too many spirit pills to the point of vomiting. Lu Yi really wanted to give the alchemists a suggestion. Could they make some different flavors? For example, apple-flavored, orange-flavored, or even banana-flavored. He ate dozens of spirit pills of the same flavor every day. He really couldn't stand it. Yi sent a message saying that she had found the female cultivator. She was obviously very vigilant and was constantly changing her position to avoid being ambushed by Lu Yi. Lu Yi, Lu Yi. She's so big. Yi's message was mixed with some strange information. She's even bigger than big sister Huaxi. H? No, she's the one you like. What nonsense are you spouting? Don't be soft-hearted later. In the small space, Bai Lan didn't dare fly on her weapon because she had long heard that Lu Ye's speed was unparalleled. Even sword cultivators couldn't fly as fast as Lu Yi. As a magic cultivator, she didn't dare show off her slight skill in front of an expert. She moved quickly, searching for traces of Lu Yi. As a magic cultivator, if she wanted to defeat Lu Yi, her only hope was to not let Lu Yi get close to her. As long as she could put enough distance between them, no matter how strong Lu Yi was, she would be blasted to pieces by her spells. Suddenly, she stopped. In the direction she was heading, there was an additional figure standing there expressionlessly, as if he had been waiting for her for a long time. Lu Yi. Bai Lan's reaction couldn't be said to be slow. The moment she saw Lu Yi, she raised her hand and cast a spell. Spiritual power surged, and water rippled, forming a fog. 3 fierce beasts made purely of spiritual power rushed out from the fog and pounced at Lu Yi from 3 directions. She raised her hand and pointed, and a huge disk of spiritual power appeared above her head. Runes flowed on the disk, and as the runes flowed, water arrows blotted out the sky and shot toward Lu Yi. Lu Yi raised an eyebrow. She thought to herself that the top 50 cultivators were not the same as the previous ones. Their casting speed, strength, and distance were indeed something she had never seen before. Among the 5 elements, water element spells were generally weak, but the water element spells Bai Lan used didn't have this problem. The power of each spell was not inferior to that of the other elements. The weapon box buzzed, and 9 spirit weapons flew into the sky. They were divided into 3 groups and went to meet the 3 ferocious beasts. At the same time, he pulled out the Pan Shan saber at his waist. Spiritual energy surged around him, and he accurately split the water arrows that shot at him. The collision of fire and water element spiritual power caused a large amount of fog to appear in the space between the 2 of them. Bai Lan stared at Lu Yi, and although her expression didn't show it, her heart was filled with shock. Lu Yi's mind was so strong. She could control 9 spirit artifacts, and each one was like an extension of her body. Not only that, but she could also split her attention to split her water arrows without missing a single one. This only showed that the other side was able to deal with her attacks with ease and didn't even bother to dodge. At this moment, Bai Lan's heart ached. Every spell cultivator hoped that their mind was as strong as possible, because the stronger the mind, the better the control of spiritual power, and the stronger the spell. They would even do some special cultivation to strengthen their mental strength. However, this weapon cultivator's mind was far stronger than a spell cultivator's, and Bailon couldn't help but be envious. The disc in the sky slowly disappeared, and the water arrows stopped falling. Lu Yi put away his blade, and in the next moment, he frowned, and the 9 spirit artifacts flew back into the weapon box. He sensed that the connection between the 9 spirit artifacts and himself seemed to have weakened a lot. The 3 fierce beasts formed by water element spiritual power were not only a killing move, but also had the effect of eroding spirit artifacts. Water element formless. It seemed that this was Bailan's unique ability. With this ability, other people would be at a disadvantage if they fought against her with spirit artifacts, because the power of the spirit artifacts would rapidly weaken. Bailan was about to activate another spell, but Lu Yi raised his hand. Wait. Bailan looked at him vigilantly, and her spiritual power was ready to be released. What? In battle, Lu Yi rarely said anything to the enemy, but this time, for the sake of the dozen or so leaves on the innate skill tree that hadn't been burned, he had to say something. I want 20 earth core flames. Huh? Bailan was confused, and obviously didn't understand. The spiritual stream list challenge was nothing more than a matter of life and death, or one side would take the initiative to admit defeat. Why did Lu Yi suddenly ask for some earth core flames? Was there something wrong with this person's brain? It's sold in the Tianji treasure house, and one is worth 200 merit points. I want 20. For some reason, Bailan calculated seriously. Then wouldn't it cost 4,000 merit points? After saying that, her face darkened. Why was she calculating this? Chapter 393. Yes, 4,000 merit points. You may not have that many merit points, but I think you should have a way to get them. The most common way to get merit points was to kill enemies, and one could also get them by selling things in the Tianji treasure house. Under normal circumstances, it was very difficult for a spirit stream realm cultivator to accumulate so many merit points. Of course, if one was a guardian or deputy guardian of a station, they could also get it by giving themselves a monthly salary. 4,000 merit points was a huge number for cultivators in the outer or inner circle, but for some cultivators in the core circle, it was not impossible for them to get it if they worked hard. Especially for a powerful and beautiful female cultivator like Bailan, who would be protected in any sect. Even if she could not get it herself, someone would find a way to get it for her. Lu Yi wanted 20 earth core flames. It was not an exorbitant demand, but a number given after comprehensive consideration. Why should I give you 20 earth core flames? Bailan said angrily. This was the first time she had encountered such a situation in a spirit stream list challenge, and it really made her speechless. This sect exterminator Ye's fierce reputation was like thunder to her ears, but now that she saw him, she knew that there was something wrong with his head. Thinking about it, if there was nothing wrong with his head, would the entire myriad Devil Ridge be against him? If you want to fight, then fight. What are you talking about? Bailan shouted. Then, she saw Lu Yi leaving an afterimage behind her as she rushed towards her at high speed. She raised her hand and shot out spell after spell, continuously bombarding Lu Yi. However, that person was actually shuttling back and forth between the spells, accurately avoiding each attack and quickly closing the distance between them. If an ordinary cultivator encountered such a situation, they would definitely open up a distance and continuously attack while retreating. But Bailan was an expert ranked 48th on the spirit stream list, so how could she be an ordinary cultivator? Moreover, the moment Lu Yi moved, she realized that their speeds were not on the same level. Not only was Lu Yi unparalleled in the speed of his flying tool, but his own speed was also amazing. She could not retreat far at all. Therefore, she made a prompt decision and formed a seal with one hand. At the same time, a ray of light suddenly lit up on the back of her hand. It was not the light of a battlefield mark, but the light of a spirit pattern. On the back of this woman's hand, there was a tattoo made by a spirit pattern master. The Jade Blood sect had a spirit rune grandmaster like Madame Yun, so how could the myriad Devil Ridge not have one? However, things like inscriptions were too valuable, so very few spirit stream realm cultivators had them. Not to mention the various materials needed to inscribe the spiritual inscriptions, it would also cost a lot to hire those spiritual rune masters. To be more realistic, the tattooed wings that Lu Yi had obtained before were not inferior to a magic tool in terms of value. Furthermore, tattoos were divided into visible tattoos, hidden tattoos, temporary tattoos, and permanent tattoos. Each type of tattoos required different resources. The tattoo that Bai Lan had used was obviously a hidden tattoo, because it could not be seen before. It would only appear when she activated it. This way, it could catch the enemy off guard. He just didn't know if this was temporary or permanent. If it was the latter, then the cost of inscribing this spirit rune would be huge. Although the spirit rune disappeared in a flash, Lu Yi could still see it clearly. It looked a little familiar, like the thunder-guiding spirit rune that he had just obtained. The surrounding area was full of fog formed by the collision of water and fire spirit power. It covered a large area, so it was too late to escape from this area. Lu Yi immediately understood his opponent's plan. He immediately urged his spirit power to cover his body with a layer of defensive spirit runes. A bolt of lightning fell directly towards Lu Ye's location. In an instant, the area covered by the fog was covered by lightning snakes, and the sound of crackling could be heard. Lu Ye's body shook as he felt the strength of the top 50 of the spirit stream list. The defensive spirit rune around his body rapidly weakened. Even if he desperately urged his spirit power to maintain the spirit rune's operation, it only lasted for 3 breaths of time before it broke. Few spirit stream realm cultivators could withstand the power of this kind of lightning. Under Bai Lan's horrified gaze, Lu Ye's face was charred black as he rushed out of the lightning-filled space. As he rushed, he spat out a mouthful of black qi. Although Bai Lan was shocked, her hands did not stop moving. A lifelike, ferocious water dragon rushed towards Lu Yi, and at the same time, she quickly retreated. She had no choice but to retreat. Her strongest trump card had not been able to do anything to Lu Yi, so how could she dare to stay where she was? The Pan Shan saber wrapped in flames slashed down. When it collided with the water dragon, a huge impact came head-on, which made Lu Ye's saber tremble slightly. A light flashed on the saber as it was reinforced by the heavy-pressure spirit rune. The long saber broke the water dragon in two like a hot knife through butter. In an instant, it was in front of Bai Lan and fiercely chopped down. Bai Lan's face was full of fear. She touched a tear-like earring on her earlobe, and as her spirit power surged, a layer of protection quickly formed. Lu Yi originally did not intend to take Bai Lan's life. After all, he was counting on her to give him the earth core fire. If he killed her, there would be no earth core fire. However, when he saw the layer of protection, the Pan Shan saber flashed again, and the dual sharpness spirit rune was strengthened. Under the attack, Bai Lan's body flew out like a ragged sack, looking very embarrassed. The protection was not broken, so she was not injured. After all, the earring was a high-grade spirit weapon. Even if she could not use all of its power, it was enough to protect her from death. However, under this saber, the protective light curtain's luster was greatly reduced, and the huge impact could not be offset. Bai Lan hurriedly got up, but before she could stand firm, she felt a strong attack and flew out again. This time, the protective light curtain was extremely dim. It could not withstand the third saber strike. Bai Lan panicked. She thought that with this high-grade spirit weapon given by her master, she could be in an invincible position, but now she knew that she had underestimated this thug. The strength of the other party's attack was beyond her understanding. She really could not understand how the power of a saber strike from a Tianba cultivator could be so terrifying. Lu Yi did not chase after her, but stood quietly in place. Bai Lan hurriedly got up and looked at Lu Yi from a distance, still in shock. "You have half an hour." After saying this, Lu Yi shouted again, "I admit defeat." His figure quickly faded and then disappeared. Bai Lan was dumbfounded. She was ready to admit defeat, but the other party actually admitted defeat first. What was this? Bai Lan instantly understood Lu Ye's plan. In half an hour, that thug would come and challenge her again. Damn it! On the huge rock near the cliff, the man anxiously waited. Although his junior sister had a high-grade spirit weapon to protect her, Lu Ye's previous battle record was obvious to all. Since he started fighting, none of the Wanmo Ridge's cultivators who were ranked higher than him had survived. His junior sister was his heart, so how could he not be worried? Just as he was feeling uneasy, the space in front of him distorted, and his junior sister's figure suddenly appeared. The man looked at her, then looked at the spirit stream list. His junior sister's ranking had not changed, and Lu Ye's ranking had not changed either. "You won?" the man cried out in surprise. Bai Lan looked at her senior brother with a pale face. Thinking that she would have to face that aggressive thug again in half an hour, her mouth twitched. "Senior brother," the man's expression changed, and he nervously asked, "What's wrong, junior sister? Are you hurt?" Sob, sob, sob. Bai Lan threw herself into his arms and cried. The man was extremely anxious. "Are you hurt anywhere? Tell me quickly." Bai Lan just kept crying and shook her head. The man's face turned green. His junior sister did not have any injuries, but she was so sad. Could it be, bastard Lu Ye, you and I cannot exist under the same sky? After a while, when Bai Lan calmed down, the man finally understood the situation. His heart relaxed. Things were not as he thought. "You said that bastard asked you for 20 earthen core flames?" "Yes." "Then he will challenge you again in half an hour?" "He definitely will." Just now, he admitted defeat and left the battle arena. Bai Lan shuddered when she recalled the aggressiveness of that thug wielding his saber. She had fought with many weapon cultivators before, but none of them had ever given her such a strong sense of oppression. That long saber wrapped in flames did not hurt her body, but it made her spirit feel like it was riddled with holes. No matter what, she did not want to fight with that kind of person. The feeling of her life being in danger was very uncomfortable. She was sure that if it were not for the high-grade spirit weapon given to her by her master, she would have died in the battle just now. That's simple. When he challenges you later, just refuse. It's not like you have to fight with him. The crying Bai Lan sniffled. She thought about it again. That's right. I have the right to refuse. There is no need to fight with him. As long as my ranking on the spirit stream list is lower than his, he will never find trouble with me. That hateful guy actually wants to extort 20 earthen core flames from me. Go die. Senior brother is smart. Bai Lan smiled through her tears. She wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes and relaxed. Inside the wooden house in the Thousand Poison Forest, Lu Yi was cultivating. Yi and Hua Xi sat in front of him, facing Lu Yi together. Stare. If you have something to say, just say it. Lu Yi was a little uncomfortable being stared at. Hua Xi said in a strange tone, I didn't know that the dignified sect exterminator Yi would be a man who cares about women. Yi added, he doesn't care about all women, unless they have a lot of capital. How much? Well, at least older than you. Hua Xi thought for a moment. Isn't that a tiring life? I don't know. Yi expressed that she had never experienced such a burden. She asked curiously, Sister Hua Xi, are you tired? Hua Xi smiled gently. I'm fine. That's enough. Seeing that the two women were slowly going off topic, Lu Yi couldn't bear it anymore. Am I that kind of person in your eyes? The two women thought about it seriously and nodded together. Yi said, "When we set out from Azure Cloud Mountain, didn't you like it when those female cultivators preached to you? The more they preached, the more you enjoyed it." Hua Xiai also said, "I still remember the first time we met. Some people were wrapped up like rice dumplings, but their eyes were very shifty." "You misunderstood me." Lu Yi was a little sad. Chapter 394. Inside the wooden house, Lu Yi couldn't take it anymore, and kicked Yi and Hua Xiai out. After checking the spirit stream list, he pondered for a moment, then focused his mind on the battlefield imprint. He found Yu Lianzhou's imprint and sent him a message. "Fellow Taoist Yu, do you know anyone ranked after 50th on the spirit stream list?" Soon, Yu Lianzhou replied, "I know most of them, but there are a few I haven't contacted." "What's the matter?" "I want you to help me pass a message to them." It didn't take long for Yu Lianzhou to understand Lu Ye's intentions. Although he didn't know why, he still replied, "Leave it to me." If he wanted to get what he wanted from Bailan, he couldn't rely on himself. He needed the cooperation of others. After ending his message with Yu Lianzhou, Lu Ye's mind connected to the spirit stream list, and he issued another challenge to Bailan. Aside from some rules, there weren't many restrictions when challenging someone on the spirit stream list. Therefore, even though Lu Yi had just admitted defeat, he could still issue another challenge. On a boulder near the cliff, Bailan was talking to her senior brother about the details of her fight with Lu Yi. Because her senior brother was also on the spirit stream list, and was ranked higher than her, Lu Yi would challenge him sooner or later. If she could get more information about Lu Yi, she would be able to deal with him more easily later on. Suddenly, there was movement from the battlefield imprint. Bailan checked it, and immediately became unhappy. "Lu Yi is challenging me again. He said he would fight for an hour, but it's only been the time it takes to brew a cup of tea." He went back on his word. "Just ignore him," the man said with a laugh. "Yeah, I rejected him." Bailan leaned into her senior brother's embrace. Now that she was ranked 50th on the spirit stream list, and Lu Yi had jumped to 48th, she wouldn't have to worry about being challenged by him in the future. Just as she was thinking about that, the positions of the 48th and 53rd cultivators suddenly swapped. Lu Yi had jumped to 53rd, and the person who was originally ranked 53rd had replaced Lu Yi in the 48th position. The smile on Bailan's face gradually stiffened. Something was wrong. "Senior brother." Bailan's voice was trembling. Such a rapid change in the rankings clearly meant that the cultivator from Grand Heaven Alliance, who was originally ranked 53rd, had challenged Lu Yi, and was rejected. Rejecting the challenge was equivalent to admitting defeat, which was why the rankings had swapped. When Lu Yi was ranked 48th, she was indeed unable to challenge her, but now that she was ranked 53rd, she was qualified to challenge her. Her senior brother was obviously also paying attention to the spirit stream list. He immediately realized that something was amiss. "Did he challenge you again?" Bailan really wanted to cry. Originally, he thought that as long as he was ranked behind Lu Yi, he wouldn't have to worry about being challenged by him. Who would have thought that Lu Yi would have such a bizarre move? Lu Yi's attitude was very clear. She would rather drop her ranking than let her go. They were like maggots that could not be shaken off. Bailan hurriedly refused, and their rankings swapped again. This time, Bailan was 53, and Lu Yi was 50. But soon, Lu Yi fell to 55. He had been challenged by the person who was originally 55, it wasn't just the two of them who were paying attention to the spirit stream list. At the moment, there were many people from both the Myriad Devil's Ridge and the Grand Heaven Alliance who were paying close attention to the changes in the spirit stream list. There was no other reason. In the past few days, Lu Yi's ranking had risen too quickly. Many people had been paying attention to him. Then, numerous pairs of eyes witnessed a bizarre event that had never happened since the spirit stream list was created. Lu Yiye from the Jade Blood sect and a female cultivator called Bai Lan from the Moistening Rain sect were constantly moving up and down on the spirit stream list. From time to time, their positions would be swapped. Although some of them were moving up and some were moving down, due to the participation of other cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance, their rankings were constantly sliding down. Every time, they would only drop by 2 or 3 places, but the frequency was fast. In the blink of an eye, their rankings would change. In less than the time it took to brew a cup of tea, their rankings had dropped from the top 50 to the bottom 70. The spirit stream list had been broken. No one had ever done such a thing. It wasn't that such a thing was difficult to achieve, but that everyone who entered the spirit stream list had to move forward step by step. Who would want to fall back? The higher one's ranking was, the better the rewards from Tianji. Those were real rewards. But now, they were witnessing it. Lu Yiye was retreating. Not only was he retreating, he was also pulling someone else along with him. Others had no choice but to do so. In the Moistening Rain sect, Bai Lan's eyes were empty. She couldn't understand why she was being targeted like this. If she was guilty, she should have let Tianji punish her, not send Lu Yiye to torture her like this. There were so many people on the spirit stream list, so why did that thug choose her? Junior sister, pull yourself together, junior sister. The man grabbed Bai Lan's shoulder and shook her vigorously. Looking at his junior sister's haggard expression, his heart ached. Senior brother. Bai Lan cried out. Accept his challenge, the man said in a deep voice. But I'm not his match. I'm not asking you to fight him. You have 4 hours to accept his challenge. Keep stalling. I'll think of something. Lu Yiye and Bai Lan's rankings had fallen to the bottom of the list. Now, Lu Yiye was ranked 100, and Bai Lan was ranked 97. If the rankings changed again, one of them would definitely fall out of the spirit stream list. As for who would fall out of the list, the answer was self-evident. In the Moistening Rain sect station, Bai Lan's eyes were red and swollen. She had been under a lot of pressure for the past few days, and had barely rested. Senior brother. Bai Lan lowered her head in guilt. In front of her, the man placed a storage pouch in Bai Lan's hand. There are 20 earth core flames inside. When you give it to him, remember to make him swear a heavenly secret oath that he will not make things difficult for you in the future. Senior brother, the man raised his hand to stop her. There are only a few days left until the reward is bestowed by heavenly secret. If you fall out of the list at this time, then all your previous accumulations will go to waste. This item was given by our sect. The sect master and second elder both want to keep the peace and do their best to protect your reward from heavenly secret. If you lose face, then so be it. There will be a chance to get it back in the future. If the ranking on the spirit stream list was just an empty title, then it would be fine. No one would feel bad if they fell out of the list. However, the ranking on the spirit stream list was related to the reward from heavenly secret. For spirit stream stage cultivators, it was a rare benefit. No one would easily miss it. There were only a few days left until heavenly secret would bestow the reward to Bai Lan. If they fell out of the list at this time, it would be too much of a loss. 4,000 merit points was not a small amount. However, compared to the future of an elite disciple, it was nothing. As a second-grade sect, the Moistening Rain sect could naturally afford it. He hasn't challenged you yet, right? The man asked again. Yes. It seems that he is giving you time to prepare. This is the final ultimatum. Lu Yiye was currently ranked in the top 100. If he challenged her again, Bai Lan would fall to the top 100. Then, if Lu Yiye manipulated her a little, she would easily fall out of the list. When he challenged her again, Bai Lan's name would completely disappear from the spirit stream list. Even if she had the chance to re-enter the list, the time she had accumulated before would be nullified. She would have to start counting again for a month. So, you have to make things clear with him later. Then, try your best to reach the highest rank in the shortest time possible. Leave the rest to me. I will definitely make Lu Ye pay the price. Bai Lan wanted to say that senior brother might not be a match for that thug. However, she was afraid of hurting senior brother's self-esteem. He challenged me. Bai Lan's expression suddenly changed as she checked the battlefield imprint. Go. Bai Lan nodded and grabbed the storage bag with the 20 earth core flames. She calmed her mind, chose the terrain, and accepted the challenge. Chapter 395. The space distorted and the field of vision changed. Bai Lan's figure gradually appeared in the same battlefield. This time, she didn't hide, but summoned her flying spirit tool. It was a beautiful spiritual artifact that looked like a feather. Standing on the spiritual artifact, Bai Lan soared into the sky. The battlefield was a dozen miles wide. It wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. If everyone was on the ground, it would take a lot of effort to find them, but it was easy to fly in the air. Lu Ye. Bai Lan wanted to shout out the name of the thug to show that she was not afraid of him, but when the words reached the tip of her tongue, her voice inexplicably weakened. It was as if the name was enough to remind her of the trauma buried deep in her heart. As soon as she finished speaking, a stream of light soared into the sky from somewhere below. Bai Lan was shocked and hurriedly urged the power of the earrings to cover her body. Only then did she feel a little safer. Lu Yi didn't attack her. Instead, he hovered 30 feet away from her, his hand on the hilt of his knife, his face calm as he looked forward. When this woman called Bai Lan accepted his challenge, he knew that his plan had succeeded. She should have prepared 20 earth core flames. Otherwise, she wouldn't have accepted his challenge. Everything was going well. He had planned to kick Bai Lan out of the spirit stream list if things didn't go well. Then, he would find someone else. There were so many myriad Devil Ridge cultivators on the spirit stream list. There were bound to be one or two heroes who knew how to adapt to circumstances. Now, it seemed that it wouldn't be too troublesome. Don't come any closer. I'm warning you, if you dare to take one step closer, I'll shout those 3 words. In the sky, Bai Lan shouted seriously, using the fiercest tone to say the most cowardly words. As for which 3 words she was referring to, everyone was well aware. Down below, Yi, who had been preparing to search for Bai Lan, quietly revealed herself. After hearing her words, she couldn't help but hold her forehead. What kind of psychological torture had this woman gone through in the past few days? Why would she say such words after seeing Lu Yi? In the air, Lu Ye's gaze fell on the storage bag in Bai Lan's hand. He understood and reached out to her. I've prepared it. I can give it to you. Bai Lan stared at Lu Yi vigilantly, as if she was guarding against a hungry rabbit. But you have to swear a heavenly secret oath that you won't make things difficult for me for no reason in the spirit stream list. Okay. Swear it. Lu Yi stared at him expressionlessly. Swear it. Bai Lan urged. Lu Yi retracted his hand and pressed on the saber hilt at his waist. He slowly pulled out the Pan Shan saber. The sound of the saber being unsheathed was extremely ear-piercing. Bai Lan's face turned pale. She retreated cautiously. What are you doing? I won't make any heavenly oath. Since I've made a promise to you, I'll keep it. You can choose to believe it or not. It's up to you. Lu Yi held his saber in his hand, and his spiritual power surged. The long saber was covered in flames, and he assumed an attacking posture. He pointed the tip of his saber at Bai Lan, and by the time he finished speaking, he had already turned into a stream of light and rushed towards Bai Lan. In that instant, even with the protection of a high-grade spiritual weapon, Bai Lan couldn't help but feel a prickling sensation in her back. Almost as soon as Lu Yi moved, she threw the storage bag in her hand forward and shouted, I'll give it all to you, I'll give it all to you. This is too much of a bully, sob sob sob. Lu Yi, who was rushing forward, suddenly stopped. He grabbed the storage bag and opened it. After checking the contents, he confirmed that there were indeed 20 earth core fire. Feeling satisfied, he raised his head and looked forward. Do you want me to send you off? This woman called Bai Lan still hadn't left. Bai Lan felt wronged. You've already extorted so many things from me. Can't you just admit defeat? She didn't want to fall to the 100th place. She was currently ranked 97th. Although she was only 3 places away from the 100th place, the last 3 places on the spirit stream list were the most troublesome. This was because everyone who had the strength to challenge the spirit stream list would choose to challenge these 3 people. This was the rule of the spirit stream list. When Lu Yi had first started to challenge the list, he had started with these 3 people. If she didn't have the strength to rush up, she would fall off the list sooner or later. If she was ranked 97th, she wouldn't have to worry about that. Lu Yi immediately understood her thoughts. Since he had taken advantage of her, his mouth would be soft. 4,000 merit points was enough to satisfy her request. Lu Yi felt that he was a reasonable person. Of course, this was also because his opponent's words made sense. I admit defeat. With that, Lu Ye's figure disappeared, returning to the wooden house in the myriad poisons forest. Yi and Hoopa also appeared beside him. Now that he had 20 portions of earth core flame, he didn't know whether or not he would be able to completely ignite the leaves. Lu Yi took out a portion of earth core flame and was about to devour it when the battlefield imprint suddenly vibrated. He had been challenged. At the same time, a message was quickly spreading in the Yi League. All the cultivators who had the qualifications to challenge the spirit stream list were to challenge Lu Yi in batches, making it impossible for him to challenge the spirit stream list again. Furthermore, if this continued, no matter how strong he was, he would be replaced sooner or later. This matter was initiated by Shi Guang from the Profound Tao sect, and received the full support of the cultivators from the various myriad Devil Ridge sections. Many cultivators were actively participating. Lu Yi was too hateful. Previously, when he had challenged the spirit stream list, he had wiped out all the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators ranked above him. Even now, no one knew how he had done it. In a challenge for the spirit stream list, if one was no match for the opponent, they could simply shout out the word admit defeat. That way, they would be able to preserve their life, unless the difference in strength between the 2 sides was too great, and one side had the opportunity to instantly kill the other. This time, Shi Guang had initiated the initiative to challenge Lu Yi in batches. First, he wanted to delay him so that he wouldn't have the opportunity to challenge the spirit stream list again. If possible, he wanted to drag him down from the spirit stream list. Second, he wanted to figure out how this guy could make the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators unable to even shout out the word admit defeat. Shi Guang knew that Lu Yi was very strong, and that he indeed had the ability to instantly kill an ordinary Tianjiu. Therefore, he had specifically instructed that all the challengers should use all of their defensive measures before entering the battlefield. Furthermore, it was best to have a body cultivator challenge them in the early stages. They didn't really expect to win against Lu Yi, and their main goal was to exhaust his spiritual power. When the time was right, people from other sects could take the stage and defeat him. Inside the wooden house, Lu Yi had been looking forward to using his innate skill tree to devour the 20 portions of earth core flame. He wanted to see if the new spiritual pattern was the one he was looking for. However, he had never expected to be challenged at such a critical moment. How infuriating! His mind entered the battlefield imprint, and he connected it to the spirit stream list. He accepted the challenge and chose the terrain of the battlefield. Then, his figure disappeared. Lu Yi appeared in the battlefield, which was only a few dozen feet in radius. This terrain was especially suitable for a weapon cultivator. The moment the white light in his field of vision dissipated, Lu Yi saw a body cultivator on the other side of the battlefield, holding a large shield made of spiritual power and wearing a thick armor. His spiritual power and blood qi mixed together to form a barrier. This bastard had actually used all of his defensive measures before he came in. Lu Yi didn't know which sect he came from. Just as he was sizing up his surroundings, he felt an enormous pressure coming from the front. Looking up, he saw Lu Yi leaving behind an afterimage as he rushed toward him. In front of him, there were 9 rays of light from Imperial equipment opening a path for him. The body cultivator didn't dare to be careless. There were so many experts on the spirit stream list that had been killed by this guy. He was still much weaker than them. Therefore, he made a prompt decision. With an angry roar, he slammed his large shield into the ground and squatted down. In an instant, a heavy aura lingered around his body, giving him a feeling of being as immovable as a mountain. Just as he got into a defensive posture, the 9 rays of light arrived in front of him. Ding ding dang dang, crack, the body cultivator's heart turned cold. Looking at his large shield, he saw the 9 restrictions spiritual artifact shatter into pieces that filled the sky. An aura of death rushed toward him. Although he still had the armor to protect his body, it was rumored that Lu Yi was the best at killing people. The armor could only protect his body, and not his neck. Just as he was about to open his mouth, Hu Pe, who was crouching on Lu Yi's shoulder, opened his mouth and roared. The powerful impact made the body cultivator feel dizzy, and he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. So that's how it is. So this was the reason why Lu Yi could make those experts on the spirit stream list unable to admit defeat. His body became light, and his vision flipped upside down. As his consciousness became blurry, he saw Lu Yi standing beside a headless corpse with a flaming long blade in his hand. That's right, this guy was the best at killing people. Next to the body cultivator's corpse, Lu Yi shook off the blood on his long blade and sheathed it. He collected his spoils of war and left the battlefield. Just as his figure appeared in the wooden house, the battlefield imprint moved again. Lu Yi checked it and frowned. He realized that the myriad Devil Ridge seemed to have organized a group to challenge him. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense for another challenge to come right after he finished one. He accepted the challenge and chose the same terrain as before. After a few dozen breaths, Lu Yi appeared again. Sure enough, a new challenge came, and it seemed like it would never end. Lu Yi wasn't in a hurry to devour the earth core flame. If the myriad Devil Ridge wanted to play like this, then he could only accompany them to the end. Time passed, and one battle after another started and ended quickly. Lu Yi had never experienced such a swift battle before. It was the same battlefield, but different opponents. Battle after battle, it seemed like there was no end to it. In half a day, more than 20 body cultivators had died at Lu Yi's hands, and as time passed, this number continued to expand. The continuous battle had consumed a great deal of Lu Yi's energy, especially now that all of his challengers were body cultivators with powerful physiques. Moreover, they had already activated all of their defensive means before entering the battlefield. If he wanted to kill them, he would have to break through their defenses in order to have a chance. Even Lu Yi couldn't hold back if he wanted to break the defenses of those body cultivators. The Pan Mountain Saber was chipped by him. One had to know that when Lu Yi chose this spirit treasure, he valued its weight. There were 9 spirit treasures inside, and more than half of them were used to strengthen the blade. Even so, the Pan Mountain Saber couldn't bear the weight anymore. Fortunately, Lu Yi didn't rely on the sharpness of the spirit weapon to kill his opponents, so as long as it wasn't broken, he could still use it. Chapter 396. In the arena, Lu Yi held the hilt of his saber as he stood at a vantage point. His cheeks puffed up as he chewed on the spirit pills in his mouth. He casually took a few bites and swallowed them down, recovering his spiritual power. Then, he took out a large piece of good quality honey and ate it. The honey he brought from the hidden fog mountain could not only recover spiritual power, but also physical strength. It was perfect for him to use. The arena, which spans several dozen meters, was locked in a fierce battle. Yi and Hoopa went up against a heavenly 9 physique cultivator. Lu Yi had been fighting for half a day, and he had used up too much energy, so he simply let Yi and Hoopa take his place. Yi had not fought before, so she had long been itching to fight. With Yi's current ability, it would be very difficult for her to win against a heavenly 9 physique cultivator. However, with Hoopa assisting her, it was different. The spirit and tiger were born together, and their minds were connected. Their cooperation was flawless. Hoopa was responsible for restraining the enemy's energy and attention, while Yi used her magical techniques to attack. Even if he could not win against his opponent for a while, the physique cultivator did not have the chance to admit defeat. Whenever he dared to open his mouth, Hoopa would let out a tiger's roar. Hoopa's roar was an innate ability that targeted the soul and mind. In Immortal Origin City, it had absorbed a lot of soul fog, causing the might of its roar to become even greater. Up until now, none of the Spirit Stream Realm cultivators he had encountered could withstand the tiger's roar's mental deterrence. After fighting for a long time, the physique cultivator's mentality exploded. He could not win, and he could not escape. He did not even have the chance to open his mouth and admit defeat. There was also Lu Yi standing on the side, eyeing him covetously. He felt that he was going to die here. Why? The Spirit Stream list challenges had always been one-on-one battles. Why would a weapon cultivator bring a pet beast with him? It was fine if he had a pet beast, but what was up with that female spell cultivator? It was supposed to be a one-on-one battle, but now it was 1 against 3. No wonder so many fellow Taoists who had challenged Lu Yi had died. In this kind of environment, who would have a good ending when they were outnumbered? He was filled with unwillingness, but there was nothing he could do. He wanted to send this information out, but this was the arena, and there was no way to send a message. After fighting for a full hour, the body cultivator finally staggered and fell to the ground. His entire body was covered with the scars of spells, making him look terrible. Yi cheered and stepped forward to collect the spoils of war. She picked up the other party's storage bag and held it in front of Lu Yi like it was a treasure. I won. Lu Yi rubbed her head and took the storage bag. You've worked hard. Do you still want to fight? Fight. Yi's gaze was firm. She rarely had the chance to temper her combat skills like this. Back when she followed Lu Yi, she was mostly surrounded by a large group of people. Now that she had taken advantage of the myriad Devil Ridge's cultivators to challenge Lu Yi, this kind of tempering would help her grow tremendously. Of course, the prerequisite was that she needed Hoopa to cooperate with her. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to defeat those Tianjiu cultivators by herself. The moment they left the battle arena, the next challenge had already arrived. Lu Yi accepted it and waited for an hour for Yi and Hoopa to recover a little before entering the battle arena. This abnormal situation quickly attracted the attention of the cultivators of the Leaf League, including the previous battle. Ever since the Leaf League started to continuously challenge Lu Yi, he would immediately accept every challenge and enter the battle arena, which would end very quickly. However, the battle just now had lasted for an hour. This time, he delayed the challenge for another hour before accepting it. What did this mean? This undoubtedly meant that Lu Yi had expended a lot of energy and was no longer at his peak, which was why he made such a choice. This made the cultivators of the Leaf League see hope, and they couldn't help but feel excited. After about an hour, the battle ended. A new challenge began. After several consecutive battles, Yi was exhausted, and Hoopa was also a little listless. Lu Yi, I can't take it anymore. You do it yourself. After Yi finished speaking, she hid inside Hoopa's body to recover. In the wooden house, Lu Yi fed Hoopa some spirit pills and accepted the challenge from the unknown cultivator. Then, he strangely discovered that the person who challenged him this time wasn't a body cultivator, but a weapon cultivator. He didn't know if it was because too many body cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge had been killed or something. After the opponent appeared, he hurriedly looked at Lu Yi. Then, he saw Lu Yi rushing towards him with an imposing aura, and his face changed greatly. The situation was a little different from what he had imagined. Lu Yi's body was intact, and he was full of energy. He wasn't an arrow at the end of its flight as he had expected. After a while, the cultivators of the Leaf League were stunned. Lu Yi had actually recovered his previous killing speed, ending a battle almost every 10 breaths. All the people who had challenged him had died, and no one knew what was going on with him. The hope that they had just seen was ruthlessly extinguished by a basin of cold water. Half a day later, Lu Yi waited in the wooden house for a long time, but he didn't see any new challenges. They didn't dare to challenge him. In the past 2 days, because of the challenges to Lu Yi, the Leaf League had lost more than 100 cultivators, and more than half of them were body cultivators. However, even with such a high-intensity challenge, they couldn't see any hope of winning against Lu Yi. If they continued to challenge him, they would just be throwing their lives away. Only now did the cultivators of the Leaf League react. Even if their previous actions had been effective, and they had driven Lu Yi out of the spirit stream list, what was the point? They couldn't kill him, and only driving him out of the list didn't seem to be a big loss for him. When they thought about it, they suddenly felt that the more than 100 people killed by Lu Yi in the past 2 days had all died in vain. How sad. Lu Yi was now at the bottom of the list, in the position of 100, which was the same as the first place. It was extremely conspicuous. He wasn't in a hurry to reach a higher rank, but took out the 20 pieces of earth core fire. After 2 days of delay, he finally had time to deal with it. Urging the innate skill tree, Lu Yi devoured the pieces of earth core fire one by one. Then, he nervously looked at the dozen symmetrical leaves and calculated their burning progress. After devouring a total of 18 pieces of earth core fire, the dozen leaves suddenly all burned. Lu Yi's nervous mood relaxed. After devouring the remaining 2 pieces of earth core fire, Lu Yi focused his mind on the dozen leaves. Boom, his mind shook slightly, and his consciousness suddenly scattered. It was as if his soul had left his body. Then, a huge amount of information poured into his mind uncontrollably, followed by an indescribable pain. Lu Yi's face suddenly turned pale. But he didn't faint. Perhaps because he had received a powerful impact from the Fire Phoenix Spirit rune before, or because his soul was tough enough, the impact this time was not to the extent of making him faint. Lu Yi would rather faint. At least he didn't have to experience this unbearable pain. After a long time, he slowly recovered. Shaking his head slightly, he felt that his whole brain was shaking, as if it was about to fall out of his head. In this state, the strength he could exert was greatly reduced. Unfortunately, no one from the myriad Devil Ridge dared to challenge him. They were all scared of being killed. Closing his eyes, he digested the huge amount of information. Lu Yi's expression gradually turned to joy. With the experience of the Fire Phoenix Spirit rune, when he saw the dozen symmetrical leaves, he felt that these leaves looked like a pair of wings, so he couldn't wait to verify it. In the end, he even extorted 20 pieces of earth core fire from Bailon. As it turned out, he was right. This new spirit rune was the flying wings he had once obtained. Before the battle at Spirit Creek, Madame Yun had bestowed upon him and Hua Xiai the flying wing tattoo on their backs. This tattoo had only lost its effect a while ago in the Land of Fire. It had been of great help to Lu Yi on many occasions, allowing him to escape with his life many times. Since this flying wing rune lost its effect, Lu Yi missed it very much, especially when he was chased by many cultivators from the myriad Devil Ridge. If he had the flying wing rune, his speed would undoubtedly be faster and his body would be more agile, so he wouldn't be in such a sorry state. But even with Madame Yun's help, bestowing the flying wing rune consumed a lot of energy. It required the blood essence of a bird-type great demon. The materials used last time were prepared by the sect master. Lu Yi originally planned to wait until he had accumulated more merit points, go to the Tianji treasure house to see if there was any suitable great demon blood for sale, and then ask Madame Yun to help him tattoo the flying wing rune. But now there was no need. Lu Yi had already mastered this spirit rune and could activate it at any time. Compared to the flying wing rune with a time limit, it was undoubtedly better. He just didn't know how much energy it would consume. With this thought, Lu Yi flashed out of the wooden house and arrived at an open space. With a slight thought, the spirit power around him surged, and flames flowed behind him. In an instant, a pair of fiery red spirit power wings spread out over 10 meters. Turning his head to look, this pair of wings built with his own spirit power as the foundation was undoubtedly more majestic than the flying wing rune from before. The consumption also seemed to be greater. Lu Yi thought for a moment and withdrew a little of his spirit power, and the fiery red wings on his back also became smaller. In the next instant, his entire body turned into a ball of fire and soared into the sky, flapping his wings. He didn't leave the range of the poisonous miasma, so he didn't fly high. The fiery red figure passed through the poisonous miasma and the poisonous miasma. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the fiery red figure descended from the sky and landed in front of the wooden house. Lu Yi half squatted, and the wings flowing with spirit power on his back slowly withdrew. After some testing, Lu Yi had a deeper understanding of this spirit rune. In terms of consumption, it was more than enhancing the flight spirit tool. Even if he had tried his best to shrink the size of the wings, this consumption was inevitable. However, compared to imperial flying, using the flying wing rune was undoubtedly more agile and faster. Previously, when he was chased by a large group of cultivators from the Myriad Devil Ridge after killing his way out of the Myriad Poison Forest, if he had the flying wing rune, he would have long left those guys behind. It could be said that with the flying wing rune, as long as Lu Yi had sufficient spirit power, he would no longer have to worry about being chased in the future. Chapter 397. Cultivators in the spirit stream realm could only fly on spiritual tools. Only when they reached the Cloud River realm could they fly. The two were different concepts. One allowed one to fly on a flying spirit tool, while the other allowed one to fly with one's physical body. Although Lu Yi had borrowed the power of the flying wing spirit tattoo, he had just experienced the benefits of flying in advance. Of course, that didn't mean that cultivators didn't need flying spirit tools after reaching the Cloud River realm. They still needed them, because flying on a flying spirit tool consumed less energy. Furthermore, some flying spirit tools could be installed with spirit stones and other consumables to replace the cultivator's own spirit power. This was especially true for large flying spirit tools, which usually relied on spirit stones and formations to operate. It was very difficult to rely on the cultivator's own spirit power to operate them. After obtaining the flying wing spirit tattoo, Lu Yi was in a good mood. Coupled with the fact that the battle had been quite intense, Lu Yi decided to rest for a day. The Spirit Stream battlefield had a rare day of peace. There weren't many changes on the Spirit Stream ranking, and there weren't many disturbances on the battlefield. Once upon a time, such a large battlefield could be peaceful because of one person's silence. The Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators sadly discovered that as long as Sect Exterminating Yi didn't jump out to cause trouble, the battlefield was still very peaceful. However, this peace was broken in a short day. One day later, Lu Yi began to rush up the ranking. On the Spirit Stream ranking, his ranking rose by a few places every few breaths of time. All of the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who were challenged by him refused without exception. Although it was humiliating, it was better than losing their lives. So many Heavenly Nine cultivators had been killed by him, and the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who were near the bottom of the Spirit Stream ranking didn't have the confidence to survive Lu Ye's attacks. Last time, Lu Yi had specifically targeted the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. He hadn't let go of any of the Myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who ranked higher than him. This time, he couldn't do it. Between the 50th and 80th places, almost all of them were from the Grand Heaven Alliance. Only after the 80th place were there a few myriad Devil Ridge cultivators. If Lu Yu wanted to climb higher on the Spirit Stream ranking, he could only choose to challenge some of the Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators. There was nothing he could do about it. Fortunately, the Grand Heaven Alliance cultivators could understand. In just an hour's time, Lu Yi had returned to the top 50 of the Spirit Stream list. This kind of ranking speed was unprecedented. At this point, there were many targets for him to challenge. Just like before, Lu Yi specifically looked for cultivators from the Myriad Demon's Ridge and challenged them one by one. It had to be said that even though Lu Ye's previous battle record was astonishing, the experts ranked in the top 50 all had their own pride. That was why when Lu Yi had first challenged them, no one had refused. Because they all had the right to be arrogant. In such a large battlefield, there were tens of millions of Spirit Stream realm cultivators. To be able to rank in the top 50, their strength was naturally not weak. Lu Yi didn't deal with these people like he had dealt with Bai Lan. Firstly, he didn't urgently need the Earth Core Fire for the time being. Secondly, he had accumulated a lot of merit points. If he really needed the Earth Core Fire, he could buy it himself. Thirdly, it would be a waste of time. 10 days had passed since he had started to attack the Spirit Stream list. Therefore, he needed to reach his limit as soon as possible. That way, he would be able to obtain even more benefits when Heaven's Secret bestowed him with rewards. If he used the same method he had used on Bai Lan to deal with these people, he wouldn't be able to obtain any benefits. Even if he succeeded, the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Any one of them, as long as they did it properly, could waste several days of his time. Therefore, he only had one goal now, and that was to attack the list. Because he was the one who had issued the challenge, the terrain was chosen by others. However, even if the terrain was suitable for them, they still couldn't escape death. After Lu Yi had challenged 3 people and killed all 3, even the experts ranked in the top 50 realized that things were not going well. They had thought that the cultivators ranked below the 50th place were too weak and couldn't even shout out the words to admit defeat. But now, it seemed that it wasn't that they were weak, but that Lu Yi had some special method that prevented the people he challenged from shouting out the words to admit defeat. The premise of accepting Lu Yi's challenge was that they could still live if they couldn't win. If it was a certain death, then they would have to consider it carefully. No one would be so stubborn as to seek death. Unfortunately, they couldn't figure out what method Lu Yi had used. Of all the Myriad Demon's Ridge cultivators who had encountered Lu Yi in the battlefield, only one had survived. That was Bai Lan of the Moistening Rain sect. Previously, some people had asked Bai Lan for information about Lu Yi. Now, they had even more information. However, Bai Lan couldn't say why. She had been completely suppressed in the battle with Lu Yi, and even the protection of her high-grade spirit artifact had almost been broken. Combined with the situation of that battle, Bai Lan had a chance to admit defeat. Therefore, Lu Yi must have some method that he hadn't used on Bai Lan. This made the cultivators of the Myriad Demon's Ridge suspicious. They secretly wondered if Lu Yi was a person who had tender feelings for women. Otherwise, why would he treat Bai Lan so differently? However, it wasn't as if there were no beautiful women on the Spirit Stream list. Besides Bai Lan, he had killed all of them. How could Bai Lan survive? Compared to the other female cultivators who had been killed, Bai Lan's only advantage was that she had a grand heart and proud capital. For a time, many people seemed to understand the truth. It was worth mentioning that after Lu Yi had started fighting, Bai Lan had also started fighting. However, the speed at which the two of them fought was on a completely different level. After all, Lu Yi had risen from the 100th to the 50th without experiencing a single battle. He had been directly rejected by his challengers and smoothly promoted. Bai Lan didn't have such a great deterrent force. After fighting one battle after another, her speed naturally couldn't be that fast. However, she already had the foundation of being ranked 48th. If she went all out, her final ranking shouldn't be too bad. Inside the wooden house, Lu Ye's mind was connected to the spirit stream list, and he challenged them one by one. After he had killed 3 powerhouses ranked in the top 50, the cultivators of the Myriad Demon's Ridge all chose to reject his next few challenges. This caused his ranking to soar to 36th. The next person he challenged was Zhuo Jianchen, who was ranked 34th. This name was somewhat familiar. Lu Yi looked at his sect and saw that it was the Moistening Rain sect. Suddenly, he remembered that this was the man who had said that he would be waiting for him a few days ago. It seemed that he was Bai Lan's senior brother. Lu Yi issued a challenge, and as expected, the other party accepted it. Lu Yi waited quietly. In the Moistening Rain sect, Bai Lan looked at the depressed Zhuo Jianchen in front of her. Senior brother, did Lu Yi challenge you? Yes. I accept. Senior brother, is it okay to refuse? Zhuo Jianchen suddenly turned his head. Why should I refuse? What are you afraid of? Bai Lan was a little confused. What? She didn't know why, but her senior brother was a little strange today. Her usually gentle and refined senior brother was now giving her an extremely gloomy feeling. Zhuo Jianchen suppressed the sullenness in his heart and asked in a deep voice, Junior sister, let me ask you. Why did Lu Yi only let you go? He didn't let me go. He extorted 20 earthen core flames from me. That's worth 4,000 merit points. Zhuo Jianchen said, all the fellow Taoists from the Myriad Demon's Ridge who accepted his challenge died. Only you survived. Did he only ask you for 20 earthen core flames? Bai Lan also felt that something was wrong. She looked at Zhuo Jianchen in surprise. Senior brother, what are you trying to say? I don't want to say anything. It's just that I heard something. How could Zhuo Jianchen not care about the rumors and slanders that were flying around outside? He didn't think too much about it at first, but when he recalled the scene where his junior sister returned after fighting with Lu Yi, he couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. A few days ago, when his junior sister returned from the battle arena, her face was extremely pale, as if she had suffered a great humiliation. In the encampment, many of his junior brothers and sisters looked at him strangely. Bai Lan's face suddenly turned pale. She had naturally heard the rumors, but how could she take them seriously? Senior brother, do you believe? I don't know whether to believe it or not. Zhuo Jianchen interrupted Bai Lan. So I will ask him face to face. Senior brother, you can't go. So many people died. Bai Lan was frightened and worried. However, the more frightened and worried she was, the deeper the thorn in Zhuo Jianchen's heart. The more he wanted to find Lu Yi and ask him. If he didn't get to the bottom of this matter, he wouldn't feel at ease for the rest of his life. All right. I'm going to prepare for this battle. Zhuo Jianchen turned around and waved his sleeve, closing the door behind him. Bai Lan stood there in a daze, her eyes blank. She really couldn't understand how things had developed to this point. Lu Yi, it's all his fault. Bai Lan gritted her teeth, wishing she could tear that man to pieces, but when his face appeared in her mind, she couldn't help shivering. She pounded on the door and shouted, Senior brother, listen to me. However, there was no response. After choosing the terrain of the battle arena, the scenery in front of Zhuo Jianchen began to change. In an average-sized battlefield, Lu Yi and Zhuo Jianchen's figures appeared at the same time. As usual, Yi immediately dove into the ground to search for traces of the enemy. Meanwhile, Hupo was crouching on Lu Ye's shoulder, motionless like a decoration. Lu Yi didn't have time to look around when he heard a shout from the front, Lu Yi, get out here. He looked up and saw a sword light floating in the air in front of him. A figure was standing on top of the sword light, giving off a sense of elegance. Moreover, there were many sword lights floating around this person, each of them a flying sword. Looking at this person's appearance, there was no doubt that he was a sword cultivator. But for some reason, this person looked angry. Lu Yiye suspected it had something to do with the 20 Earth Core fires he had extorted from his junior sister. So many people had refused his challenge before, but this person had accepted it. It seemed that not only was he confident in his strength, he was also a stubborn person. Lu Yiye liked this kind of person. Chapter 398. In the arena, Lu Yi summoned his spirit boat and flew up to Zhuo Jianqin's position, which was a few dozen feet away. Although his journey had been very smooth, Lu Yi would never underestimate his opponents, especially when the one in front of him was most likely a sword cultivator. The fact that his opponent was ranked 32nd showed that he was quite capable. Their eyes met, and Zhuo Jianqin angrily asked, "Lu Yi, what did you do to my junior sister?" Lu Yi thought for a moment. He had pushed Bai Lan from 48th to 97th place, and had even extorted the Earth Flame, which was worth 4,000 merit points. Did he really go overboard? But then again, that woman should be thanking him for not killing her. If he hadn't been in a hurry to get the Earth Flame, that woman would have been dead already. Compared to his life, what did falling on the spirit stream list and losing some treasures mean? His junior sister had been bullied, and his senior brother had come to her rescue. Lu Ye's silence made Zhuo Jianqin even angrier, and his face turned green. He gritted his teeth and said, "Fine, since you have nothing to say, then die." As soon as he finished speaking, 7 flying swords of different lengths appeared beside Zhuo Jianqin. They emitted a burst of sword light as they shot toward Lu Yi. In the blink of an eye, they had arrived in front of him. The flying swords of sword cultivators were extremely fast, and their killing power was also very strong, which was why sword cultivators could kill enemies above their level. Lu Yi didn't know much about sword cultivators, but Zhuo Jianqin could control 7 flying swords at once, so his mind was undoubtedly much stronger than that of ordinary cultivators. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to control so many flying swords. However, there was still a big gap between him and Yu Lianzhou. According to Lu Ye's knowledge, Yu Lianzhou's limit was 20 flying swords, which was almost 3 times that of Zhuo Jianqin. He was even more incomparable to Li Baxian. The number of times Li Baxian had used sword kinesis flight in the spirit stream realm was an unbreakable record. One reason for this was his innate talent, and the other reason was that he had stayed in the spirit stream realm for far too long. For more than 10 years, he hadn't been able to increase his cultivation, so he had been strengthening his mind, which was why he could control 100 flying swords. It could be said that Li Baxian's starting point in the Cloud River tier was much higher than the average person's. When the 7 flying swords came, the weapon box at Lu Ye's waist buzzed, and 9 streams of flowing light went up to meet them. In an instant, the place where the 2 of them were standing in mid-air was filled with flowing light flashing incessantly. Ding ding dang dang sounds could be heard incessantly, and occasionally there were scenes of sparks flying in all directions. Lu Yi was still very confident in his ability to control artifacts. After all, his soul was strong, and the power of his mind was strong as well. This greatly increased his ability to control spirit artifacts and spirit energy. Throughout the entire spirit stream battlefield, there was no one with a stronger soul than him, and there were only a handful of people who could surpass him in terms of artifact control. Zhuo Jianqin definitely wasn't one of them. In the air where the 2 of them were, imperial artifacts were colliding with each other. Under the control of the 2 of them, the spirit artifacts seemed to have a life of their own and were fighting against each other. But in just a moment, Zhuo Jianqin's flying sword was at a disadvantage and was completely suppressed. This couldn't be helped. Lu Yi had the advantage in terms of number of artifacts, and he could also enchant his artifacts with various spirit patterns. This was something that Zhuo Jianqin couldn't compare to. He obviously sensed that something was wrong. When his 7 flying swords were forced to close in front of him, the spiritual energy in his body suddenly surged. In an instant, the 7 flying swords, which had already been defeated, gathered together, entwined with each other, and shot out like a spinning top. As they flew, Lu Ye's artifacts were all sent flying. Sword array. Lu Yi raised an eyebrow. Although he didn't know much about the techniques of sword cultivators, he had still heard of sword arrays before. Normally, cultivators would need at least 3 people to form a sword array. However, powerful sword cultivators could form a sword array by themselves because they could control many flying swords. The might of the sword array formed by the 7 flying swords couldn't be underestimated. The sword whistled through the air, and its momentum was like thunder. In the blink of an eye, it had arrived in front of Lu Yi. Lu Ye's artifact had been sent flying, and it was too late for him to return to help. Just as the sword array arrived in front of Lu Yi, the coiling mountain saber was suddenly unsheathed. A fiery red saber light slashed down, and a powerful shockwave swept out from the front, accompanied by a cold sword intent. On the ground, Yi raised her head and saw Lu Yi holding the coiling mountain saber in front of him. In front of the saber, the sword array buzzed, pushing against his body and forcing him to retreat. Behind the sword array, Zhuo Jianquan's body had merged with the sword light, and he had become one with the sword as he attacked. Yi looked on calmly, and didn't have any intention of interfering. For Lu Yi, challenging the spirit stream list was a way to reach his limit in the shortest amount of time. At the same time, it was also a way to temper himself. Fighting with experts from various factions and fighting to the death was the best way to speed up the growth of one's strength. The opponents he had faced before were all weak and couldn't even withstand a single blow. Now that he had finally found a decent opponent, how could he interfere? 9 rays of light from the Imperial equipment attacked from the left and right. Zhuo Jianquan, who had merged with the sword light, felt the killing intent in the first moment. The long sword in his hand continuously blocked the incoming Imperial equipment. However, the huge impact caused his wrist to go numb. He was secretly shocked that Lu Yi was only a weapon cultivator, so how could his Imperial equipment be so fast and powerful? The moment he was distracted, a flaw appeared in the sword array. Lu Yi withdrew his saber and thrust it forward, and the coiling mountain saber pierced through the flaw in the sword array. Violent spiritual energy swept out, and the sword array immediately collapsed, turning into rays of light that shot out in all directions. Lu Yi's figure paused, and in the next moment, he pounced on Zhuo Jianquan like a fierce tiger descending from a mountain. The saber and sword collided, and an ear-piercing sound of friction rang out. In the air, the 2 figures were less than 3 meters away from each other, and they stared at each other. One's eyes were spitting fire, as if there was an irreconcilable hatred between them, while the other's expression was calm. Zhuo Jianquan clenched his teeth and shouted, "I'm going to kill you." Before the battle began, he was actually very worried because so far, none of the myriad Devil Ridge cultivators who had accepted Lu Yi's challenge had had a good ending. However, after the battle began, he discovered that the outside world had overestimated Lu Yi. Admittedly, this guy did have some strength, otherwise, he wouldn't have been qualified to challenge him, but that was it. Zhuo Jianquan even felt that if he worked a little harder, he could defeat Lu Yi. If that was the case, then he would be able to win glory for the myriad Devil Ridge and his sect. With a roar, Zhuo Jianquan pointed his sword and sword flowers shot towards Lu Yi. The shining saber light cut through the sky, and the sword flowers that filled the sky dissipated. Zhuo Jianquan felt a chill on his chest and instinctively took a few steps back. He looked at Lu Yi in surprise and then looked down at his chest. There was actually a bloody wound on his chest. Lu Yi's saber had been so fast that he hadn't been able to react. You. Zhuo Jianquan suddenly began to doubt himself. He had thought that Lu Yi was only SOSO, but now that Lu Yi had suddenly attacked, he immediately realized a serious problem. Could it be that what he had seen before was Lu Yi's full strength? He hadn't considered that before, mainly because he hadn't expected that someone would hold back when challenging the spirit stream list. As soon as he finished speaking, a figure flashed in front of him. Lu Yi, who had been dozens of feet away, was now in front of him. Facing the saber, Zhuo Jianquan could only block it with his sword. A vast and irresistible force swept over from above. Zhuo Jianquan's body and the air transportation spiritual tool under his feet crashed to the ground like meteors falling from the sky. With a loud bang, dust flew everywhere. Zhuo Jianquan struggled to his feet, blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. He felt as if all the bones in his body were about to fall apart. His eyes were filled with disbelief, as if he couldn't understand how he couldn't even block Lu Ye's saber. Moreover, the sudden burst of power from Lu Yi was simply shocking. Beside his feet was his air transportation spiritual tool, but under such an impact, it was basically scrapped. After all, air transportation spiritual tools didn't have much defensive power. He staggered a few steps and looked up, but didn't see Lu Ye's figure. Just as he was about to raise his guard, he heard footsteps coming from the side. Turning around, he saw Lu Yi walking over with the mountain plate saber in his hand. Lu Yi's pace wasn't fast, but there was a boundless pressure weighing down on Zhuo Jianquan's heart, making it difficult for him to breathe. Zhuo Jianquan raised his sword, pointed it at Lu Yi, and shouted, "Why didn't you use your full strength at the beginning?" Only now did he realize that Lu Yi hadn't used his full strength at the beginning, which gave him the illusion that he could beat this person if he tried. What was this? Wasn't humiliating his junior sister enough? Was he trying to humiliate him too? After hearing Zhuo Jianquan's words, Lu Yi didn't want to respond. However, after thinking for a moment, he said, "I wanted to see the strength of those ranked around the 30th place." He hadn't had a chance to fight in the previous battles, as he had been directly rejected by the cultivators of the Myriad Devil Ridge. As a result, he only had a rough idea of the strength of the cultivators ranked around the 50th place. Since Zhuo Jianquan had finally accepted his challenge, he naturally had to hold back. What's the result? I'm a bit disappointed. The corners of Zhuo Jianquan's eyes twitched violently. Just as he was about to say something, he saw Lu Ye's body surging with spiritual power as he rushed toward him. Roar. Under the tiger's roar, Zhuo Jianquan only had time to spit out a single word before his head felt as if it had been hit by a hammer, and he suddenly became dizzy. However, he was still a sword cultivator, and the fact that he could control 7 swords showed that his mind was stronger than that of ordinary spirit stream stage cultivators. Therefore, Hu Po's roar didn't affect him as much as the others. I admit defeat. As soon as Zhuo Jianquan regained consciousness, he shouted these 2 words. However, Lu Ye's figure had already disappeared, leaving only the sound of a saber sheathing behind him. Zhuo Jianquan sighed softly and looked up at the clouds in the sky. He muttered, "So that's how it is." So this was the reason why Lu Yi had been able to prevent the cultivators of the Myriad Devil Ridge from admitting defeat. Although he had shouted it, it was still a bit too late. On the spirit stream list, the 34th name trembled slightly before disappearing, replaced by the name of Lu Yi from the Jade Blood sect. Chapter 399. Zhuo Jianquan from the Moistening Rain sect, who was ranked 34th, had been killed by Lu Yi. This news spread rapidly throughout the battlefield and even the 9 regions as if it had wings. Everyone was shocked. When Lu Yi had challenged the 10,000 Devil Ridge, none of the cultivators ranked below 50th had survived. It could be explained by Lu Yi's strength being so strong that he could kill them in an instant, causing them to not even have the chance to admit defeat. But now, Zhuo Jianquan, who was ranked 34th, was not weak. How could he not even have the chance to admit defeat? Not to mention that he was a sword cultivator. It was impossible for Zhuo Jianquan to fight Lu Yi to the death. No one would be so stupid. Countless people continued to pay attention. Everyone was curious. What was Lu Yi's limit? Top 20? Top 10? Or could he reach the top of the list? Especially the cultivators from the 10,000 Devil Ridge who were ranked above Lu Yi on the Spirit Stream list. After killing Zhuo Jianquan, Lu Yi's name from the Jade Blood sect quickly rose again. In less than half a cup of tea's time, he had risen from 34th to 20th. The cultivators from the 10,000 Devil Ridge who were challenged by him directly refused. Zhuo Jianchen had been killed by Lu Ye, and they were not much stronger than Zhuo Jianchen. Naturally, they would not take the risk to accept the challenge. However, it was impossible for the spirit stream list to continue smoothly. The higher the ranking, the more arrogant they were. Most of them had a kind of self-confidence that said, just because others can't, doesn't mean I can't. Therefore, when Lu Ye chose to challenge the 17th ranked cultivator, his opponent accepted the challenge without hesitation. Lu Ye did not have to wait for long. 10 breaths after Lu Ye issued the challenge, the two of them appeared in the arena. From this, it could be seen that his opponent had been waiting for Lu Ye to challenge him, so he had made ample preparations. This arena was the kind of terrain that Lu Ye liked the most. It was not large, so he did not have to spend any effort to find the enemy's tracks. It was suitable for close combat. Looking up, Lu Ye saw a burly man with bronze skin standing in the arena. He was as tall as an iron tower, and his body was full of muscles. He was undoubtedly a body cultivator. What caught Lu Ye's attention the most was that he had 2 curved horns on his forehead. Not only that, his upper body, chest, waist, and even his arms had colorful tattoos. Was this a dominant tattoo? There were millions of cultivators in the 9 regions, and each of them had a different personality. Some were reserved, some were passionate, and some were like the body cultivator in front of him, who liked to show off. The visible tattoos on his body were enough to show that he was not someone to be trifled with. If you were to encounter a slightly weaker cultivator, just looking at these visible tattoos would create a huge psychological pressure because no one knew what kind of miraculous effects those tattoos would have. Looking at the 2 curved horns on the other party's forehead, Lu Yi guessed that the other party should be a Yao cultivator. Most Yao cultivators were full of vitality and were naturally suited to be body cultivators. The other party was even equipped with bracers on his arms and boxing gloves with barbs on his fists. Whether it was the bracers or the boxing gloves, they were clearly spirit artifacts of good quality. This was the first time Lu Yi had encountered a body cultivator who didn't use a shield-type spirit artifact. He immediately concluded that this guy wasn't easy to kill. This kind of body cultivator did not focus on defense. Instead, like weapon cultivators, they were more inclined towards offense. In addition, their skin was rough and their flesh was thick, so they were very difficult to deal with. "Are you that Lu Ye?" the Yao cultivator shouted. The weapon box on Lu Ye's waist shook, and a stream of light greeted the other party. In the blink of an eye, the imperial equipment arrived in front of him. The Yao cultivator just raised his hand and waved it, and with a clanking sound, Lu Ye's imperial equipment was blocked. However, after blocking one, there was a second, and then a third. The clanking sound was endless. The Yao cultivator's arms were constantly waving, relying on the bracers on his arms to send the imperial equipment flying. In a moment, he was annoyed. "You've gone too far, do you dare to come over?" Lu Yi was expressionless. He only used his imperial equipment to attack. From time to time, the imperial equipment would burst out with spiritual light, and various types of spiritual inscriptions would be added to it. The Yao cultivator was overwhelmed. He looked even angrier. Several times, he wanted to break through the blockade of the imperial equipment and kill Lu Yi, but he was forced back. However, it had to be said that although this guy was big, his movements were extremely agile. Lu Yi used 9 imperial equipment, but not a single one could hurt him. Moreover, Lu Yi keenly noticed that this guy looked extremely angry, but in fact, his eyes were calm. The so-called anger was just a facade. "Ah, I'm so angry, I'm going to kill you." Entangled by the streams of light from the imperial equipment, the Yao cultivator roared. The tattoo on his chest suddenly shone brightly, and a blood-red head of an unknown beast suddenly appeared, roaring in front of him. The roar was so loud that it was deafening. Lu Ye's 9 imperial equipment were all shaken by the impact. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the Yao cultivator took a big step forward and crashed toward Lu Yi like a mountain. Soon, he was in front of Lu Yi and punched. Lu Yi leaped and nimbly dodged the attack. In midair, he unsheathed the mountain blade and slashed at the back of the Yao cultivator's neck. However, at this moment, the seemingly clumsy figure turned around at an unimaginable speed. Wearing a glove, his fist met the mountain blade. At the same time, his other hand opened and aimed at Lu Yi. Spirit force violently surged in his palm, and a small disc formed by spirit force appeared in his palm. This was the sign that he was about to use a spell. No one would have guessed that such a burly body cultivator with a reckless temperament would also be a cultivator of spells. Furthermore, judging from the speed at which he was casting spells, his talent in spells was definitely not too low. The Yao cultivator's eyes revealed a trace of mockery. On the surface, it looked like a reckless attack that exposed his weakness, but in reality, it was just a bait. Basically, no one could defend against this move of his. When he was fighting for the leaderboard previously, many cultivators from the Grand Heaven Alliance were killed by him just like that. With a bang, the mountain blade collided with the Yao cultivator's iron fist. In an instant, the Yao cultivator's expression froze. He felt as if a mountain was pressing down on his shoulder. His legs bent and he almost knelt on the ground. At the same time, Lu Ye's figure was also sent flying. The strength of the Yao cultivator's punch was incomparably great. As he squatted down, the Yao cultivator immediately adjusted his center of gravity. The spell he had prepared in his other hand was aimed at Lu Ye's flying body. An attack formed by a mixture of spirit force and qi and blood force struck Lu Ye's chest. This directly blasted Lu Yi to the edge of the battle stage and he slowly slid down. The huge pressure on his shoulder disappeared. The Yao cultivator stood up and looked at Lu Yi, who was unscathed and standing steadily again. The corners of his eyes twitched. He had long heard that the Jade Blood Sect's Lu Yi could activate a defensive spirit pattern in battle. Today, he finally saw it with his own eyes. In that instant, his spell did hit Lu Yi, but before that, he clearly saw a spirit pattern barrier suddenly appear and block his attack. Therefore, although Lu Yi looked a little embarrassed at the moment, he was actually not injured. Dozens of feet away, the Yao cultivator grinned. As a body cultivator, it's reasonable for you to be proficient in several spells, isn't it? Lu Yi nodded silently. Holding his blade, he lowered his eyes and walked towards the Yao cultivator step by step. The figure dozens of feet away suddenly became blurry, leaving behind a string of afterimages. The Yao cultivator's expression changed greatly. He had never seen anyone in the spirit stream realm who could have such a strange speed. He hurriedly activated his eyesight, trying to see Lu Ye's figure clearly. Seeing a flash of blade light, he hurriedly raised his arms in front of his body. No attack fell. Instead, he felt a strong wave of spirit force coming from behind him. He hurriedly turned around and waved his arm. With a clang, the Pan Mountain Saber landed on the bracer. Sparks flew, and the feeling of a mountain pressing down on him came again. The Yao cultivator forcibly stabilized his body, but before he could stand up straight, a scorching heat swept over him. In his vision, a beautiful fire phoenix rushed over. Before it even got close, the Yao cultivator already felt the unbearable heat. Yes, this Lu Yi was also proficient in spells. Moreover, the other party's casting speed and power were superior to his own. Flames soared into the sky and wrapped around the Yao cultivator. A powerful qi and blood burst out, tearing the fire phoenix apart, revealing the Yao cultivator's strong figure. However, before he could see the situation around him, another blade slashed down. He hurriedly blocked it, but the fire phoenix enveloped him again. One blade, one spell, one blade, one spell, it seemed to be endless. As far as the eye could see, the Yao cultivator's body was constantly standing up and squatting down, enduring the attacks of the Pan Mountain Blade and the Fire Phoenix spell again and again. He wanted to run, but Lu Yi didn't give him a chance to escape. The beast cultivator was furious. Although his physique was strong enough, he couldn't hold on against such an unreasonable opponent. He was annoyed for a moment. Body cultivators were just using the means of body cultivators. What kind of technique were they using to tease others? Great, he had obviously pissed off Lu Yi. He felt that he was going to die. Crash, when the sound rang out, the Yao cultivator's blood was really cold. The arm guard on his wrist was cut into pieces. He hurriedly activated the power of the spirit tattoo on his chest. When the roar of a beast sounded, a powerful impact swept out in all directions. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he hurriedly pulled away and gasped for breath. On the battle stage, the two figures stood 100 feet apart from each other. There was not a single hair left on the demonic cultivator's body. All the hair on his body had been burned away. Lu Yi's gaze turned to his abdomen and arms. The tattoos on these two places didn't seem right. Can't I play with them? The Yao cultivator flew into a rage out of humiliation. What's there to see? Of the tattoos all over his body, only the one on his chest was a real tattoo. The rest were just decorations. However, this kind of tattoo was no different from a real tattoo. When exposed like this, it would easily create a psychological pressure. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.